I always thought I knew my brother better than anyone else in the world. After all, we shared the same room for 18 years, the same childhood fights, and the same dreams of building something great together. But today, sitting in this empty office in downtown Portland, staring at the cardboard boxes that contain the wreckage of my company, I finally understand the truth that's been right in front of me all along. My name is Daniel Cooper. I'm 41 years old. I'm a software engineer, or at least I was until 3 weeks ago. And this is the story of how I discovered that my own brother spent 15 years sabotaging every aspect of my life. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment about where you're watching from. I promise, what you'll hear will make you rethink every family relationship you have. It all started so innocently it seems like a joke now. Marcus, my older brother by 3 years, was always the charismatic one in the family. The guy who lit up any room he entered, you know. I was the nerd, the quiet one, the one who stayed up late programming while he went out with his friends and won over every girl in school. I was never jealous of him, swear to God. I genuinely admired my brother and felt we shared that special bond only brothers can have. When I finished my master's degree at MIT and returned to Portland with a revolutionary idea for business management software, Marcus was the first person I approached. He had a degree in business administration, had a gift for the gab, and I needed someone I could trust to handle the business side while I developed the product. Cooper Brothers Tech was born in 2009, right in the middle of the financial crisis, in a tiny apartment in northeast Portland that barely fit the two of us and our computers. I remember it like it was yesterday. We worked 16-hour days, ate ramen every single day, and Marcus always said we were an unbeatable duo, that together we would dominate the West Coast enterprise software market. I believed him with every fiber of my being. We split everything 50-50, signed the papers in a rundown attorney's office near Powell Boulevard, and toasted with cheap beer, dreaming of the day we'd be rolling in cash. Back then, Marcus was my hero, my partner, my best friend. How could I have been so blind? The first 3 years were difficult, I won't lie. There were months when we didn't know if we'd be able to pay the rent on the office space we finally managed to rent in 2011. But the software I developed was truly excellent, revolutionary even, and little by little we began to gain clients. Small businesses first, then medium-sized ones, and in 2014 we closed our first major contract with a supermarket chain worth $340,000. I remember crying in the office bathroom that day, out of pure joy and relief. Marcus hugged me and told me this was just the beginning, that soon we'd be making millions. And he was right. By 2016, Cooper Brothers Tech had annual revenue of $4.2 million and 15 employees. But here's the part I didn't know then. While I spent nights and weekends perfecting our product, fixing bugs, developing new features, and ensuring every customer was 100% satisfied, Marcus was carefully crafting a completely different narrative for the outside world. At networking events, in investor meetings, at industry conferences, my brother would tell a version of our company's story in which he was the visionary genius, and I was just the skilled technician who turned his ideas into code. He never said it explicitly to my face. It was always subtle, always with that charming smile of his, always making it seem like he was praising me, while in fact, he was putting me down. The first crack in my blind spot appeared in 2017, during a Thanksgiving dinner at our parents' house in Lake Oswego. My girlfriend at the time, Jennifer, an amazing graphic designer I'd met at a tech event, casually mentioned that she'd heard Marcus giving an interview for a local podcast about entrepreneurship. She said she thought it was strange that he'd talked for 40 minutes about the company's creation and growth, without mentioning my name once. I laughed at the time, telling her she must have misheard, that Marcus would never do that. But Jennifer insisted, saying she'd been so bothered that she went back and listened to the episode again to be sure. That night, alone in my apartment, I downloaded the podcast and listened to every word. She was right. During that 43-minute interview, Marcus crafted a brilliant narrative about how he had identified a gap in the market, developed the solution, founded the company, and overcome all obstacles. When the interviewer specifically asked about the technical team, Marcus responded with something like, "Oh yeah, we have very capable developers. My brother Daniel is the lead developer. He's great at executing the vision." Executing the vision. As if I were a mere employee implementing his ideas. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to rationalize. Marcus was probably just trying to simplify the story for the podcast, right? He had no intention of erasing me from the narrative. We were brothers. We were partners. I was being paranoid. Jennifer didn't think so. She started pointing out other signs I'd ignored. How Marcus always positioned himself at the forefront of company photos. How he'd become the public face of Cooper Brothers Tech, while I stayed in the office coding. How in articles about the company in the Portland Business Journal and the Oregonian, Marcus was always quoted extensively, while I appeared, at best, as a footnote. "He's stealing your credit, Daniel," she told me one night, tears in her eyes. "And you're letting him because he's your brother." I got mad at her at that moment, telling her she didn't understand the dynamics of a startup, that someone needed to be the public face, and I hated that kind of exposure. We had a huge fight. 3 weeks later, Jennifer broke up with me, saying she couldn't be with someone who allowed themselves to be so blatantly manipulated. Jennifer's loss hurt more than I was willing to admit, but instead of reflecting on her words, I threw myself even deeper into work. In 2018 and 2019, Cooper Brothers Tech exploded. We signed contracts with mid-sized and large companies throughout Oregon, Washington, and even California. Our revenue reached $12 million annually. We hired 30 more employees. We moved to a massive office in the Pearl District with those giant windows overlooking the mountains. And me, I remained the invisible CTO while Marcus shone as CEO on the covers of regional business magazines, on panel discussions, at investment events. My parents kept sending me articles, proud of their son who had built an empire. Always Marcus, always just Marcus. But what really should have woken me up, the event that would have made any normal person realize something was wrong, happened in late 2019. A group of venture capitalists from San Francisco came to Portland interested in potentially investing in our company. We were talking about $15 million in exchange for 30% of the company. A total valuation of $50 million. It was any entrepreneur's dream. Marcus organized a series of meetings, presentations, and due diligence. I participated in some, mainly the technical ones, where they needed to understand the software architecture and our development roadmap. But the negotiations themselves, the conversations about valuation, terms, and deal structure, Marcus handled all of that alone or with our attorney. "Leave it to me, bro," he would say. "You focus on the product, and I'll take care of the tedious negotiation part." The deal closed in February 2020, weeks before the pandemic hit. $15 million poured into the company's account. The two of us, as founders with 50% each, diluted it to 35% each, but still, on paper, my share of the company was now worth $17.5 million. I was euphoric. I felt like we had finally reached our dream. Marcus threw a massive party to celebrate, renting a space on the top floor of a downtown building, an open bar, expensive catering, and inviting everyone in the Portland tech ecosystem. That night, drunk on champagne and success, I hugged my brother and told him I couldn't have done it without him. He hugged me back and whispered in my ear, "I know, bro. I always knew." At the time, I thought it was a moment of brotherly connection. Today, I understand it was a confession and a threat all at once. The pandemic changed everything, as it did for everyone. We had to send everyone working from home, adapt processes, and deal with panicked customers. But our software was essential to our clients' operations, so we not only survived but grew. In 2021, with the world reopening, Cooper Brothers Tech was stronger than ever. That's when Marcus came up with the big idea, as he called it. He wanted to expand aggressively, open offices in Seattle and San Francisco, hire 50 new employees, and develop 3 new product lines. And to do this, we needed more capital. Much more capital. He had identified a private equity fund in New York interested in buying a significant stake in the company. We're talking $80 million. I should have paid more attention to the details. I should have hired my own attorney, done my own due diligence, truly understood what I was signing. But I trusted Marcus. He was my brother. He was my partner. Why would he do anything to me? The documents were hundreds of pages of incomprehensible legalese. Clauses about liquidation preferences, anti-dilution, voting rights, board structures. Marcus assured me it was all standard, that our attorney had reviewed everything, that in the end we would both walk away multi-millionaires. "Trust me, bro," he said, placing the pen in my hand, and I signed. God forgive me, I signed without reading. The money came in September 2021. The company was now valued at $200 million. My stake had diluted to 22%, but I was still looking at a $44 million fortune on paper. I bought a beautiful house in West Hills, a Tesla, and started dating a personal trainer named Amanda, who made me feel young again. Life was good, better than I ever imagined when I was that nerdy kid eating ramen in a cramped apartment. Marcus was also living large, with a house in Lake Oswego that felt more like a mansion, a Porsche, designer clothes, and dinners at restaurants where a meal cost more than my previous month's rent. We were the Cooper brothers, the middle-class kids who had achieved the American dream, or at least that's what I thought. The first truly strange thing that should have set off alarm bells in my head happened in March 2022 during a board meeting. The private equity firm had added 3 people to our board, and now the monthly meetings were formal, intimidating affairs in a huge conference room, no longer the relaxed conversations Marcus and I had over coffee in the office. I was presenting our technical roadmap for the next quarter, talking about performance improvements and new integrations I'd designed, when one of the firm's representatives, a guy named Richard Sterling in a suit that probably cost more than my old car, interrupted me mid-sentence. He looked at Marcus and said, and I'll never forget his exact words, "Marcus, can you have your CTO email us these technical details? We need to use the board's time for strategic discussions." The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, frozen, with my laptop open and my presentation on the screen, feeling my face burn with humiliation. I waited for Marcus to defend me, to explain that I wasn't just the CTO, that I was a co-founder, that this was my company as much as his. But Marcus just gave that diplomatic smile of his and said, "Sure, Richard. Daniel, we can continue this technical discussion offline. Let's focus on growth metrics now." He didn't even look at me. He simply moved on to the next agenda item as if nothing had happened. I closed my laptop slowly, my hands shaking, and sat for the rest of that 2-hour meeting in silence, feeling something break inside me. After that meeting, I started really paying attention for the first time in years. And once you start seeing it, you can't stop seeing it. I realized that in the last 3 board meetings, Marcus had presented strategic initiatives that were essentially features and products I had proposed months earlier in our private meetings. But he presented them as his ideas, his vision, his strategy. I realized that when important clients visited the office, Marcus always arranged for them to be on days when I was working remotely or at conferences. I noticed that my email was no longer copied on important threads about company direction, commercial agreements, hiring decisions for senior positions. I was being systematically excluded from my own company, and it had been so gradual, so subtle, that I hadn't even noticed it happening. Amanda, my girlfriend, was the one who finally put into words what I was feeling, but didn't want to admit. We were having dinner at my place one Friday night. I'd made grilled salmon, opened an $80 bottle of Pinot Noir, trying to forget the horrible week I'd had. But I couldn't stop talking about work, about how invisible I felt, about how Marcus was treating me. Amanda put her fork down, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Baby, don't you see what's happening? Your brother is pushing you out of your own company. He's building a narrative where he's the founder, the visionary, the leader, and you're just a really good technical employee. And when the time is right, he'll kick you out and take everything." I laughed at her, told her she was being dramatic, that Marcus would never do that. But that night, alone in bed after she left, her words echoed in my head, and I couldn't sleep. May 2022 was when things really started to fall apart, though I didn't yet know how bad things were about to get. Marcus announced at a company-wide meeting that we were hiring a new chief product officer, a guy named Trevor Madison, who had worked at Google and then at a successful startup in San Francisco. On paper, Trevor would report to Marcus as CEO, but would work closely with me on defining product strategy. I should have questioned this immediately because product strategy was literally my responsibility, but Marcus sold it so well, talking about how we were scaling and needed world-class product leadership, that I simply accepted. Trevor started 2 weeks later with a salary of $350,000 per year plus equity, and for the first few days he was super friendly, asking my opinion on everything, calling me the technical genius behind this amazing product. But within less than a month, it became clear what the game was. Trevor started scheduling product roadmap meetings without me. He began making feature prioritization decisions in consultation with Marcus, not me. When I raised objections or different technical perspectives, Trevor would listen politely and then do exactly what he wanted anyway. And Marcus? Marcus always sided with Trevor. "Daniel, we hired Trevor for exactly this kind of strategic decision. You need to trust the process and focus on ensuring excellence in technical execution." Technical execution. I had founded this damn company, written every line of code in the original product, architected every system, and now I was being reduced to a technical execution manager, while a guy who'd known the company for 3 weeks made decisions about the future of my product. Things at home also began to deteriorate. Amanda and I fought more and more because I was constantly stressed, obsessed with work, paranoid about what was happening. She said I had changed, that I was bitter and negative, that I was no longer the fun, confident guy she had fallen in love with. And she was right. I was drowning in a toxic mix of anger, confusion, and denial. Part of me still wanted to believe I was imagining things, that Marcus was my brother and would never truly cheat on me. But a bigger, darker part was beginning to realize the ugly truth. In July, Amanda broke up with me. She told me I needed to work through my issues, that she couldn't be my therapist, that she loved me but couldn't save me from myself. I watched her leave my apartment for the last time and didn't even have the energy to cry. It was at this lowest point, alone and miserable on a Saturday night in August, that I finally did what I should have done years before. I hired my own attorney, a guy named Robert Chen, who had a reputation for being utterly ruthless but brilliant. I brought every box of corporate documents I had, every contract I had signed over the years, and asked him to go through them with a fine-tooth comb. Robert charged $800 an hour, but promised to give me a thorough and honest analysis of my legal situation. 2 weeks and $25,000 later, Robert called me into a meeting at his office in downtown Portland. The look on his face when I walked in the room told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. "Daniel," Robert began, pushing a stack of marked and annotated documents toward me. "I don't know how to break this to you gently, so I'll just say it. You've been completely screwed." He opened the private equity investment agreement I'd signed in 2021. That hundreds of pages long document Marcus had assured me was all standard. It had yellow markings everywhere. Robert pointed to a specific clause on page 147, buried deep in a section on corporate governance and voting rights. The clause stated, in complicated legalese that Robert had to translate for me, that in the event of irreconcilable differences between founders or misalignment of strategic vision, the CEO had the right, with board approval, to compulsorily buy out the other founders' shares at fair market value determined by independent appraisal. I read that clause 3 times before I fully understood. "Does this mean," I said slowly, my voice sounding dead even to my own ears, "that Marcus can force me to sell my shares?" Robert nodded grimly. "Not only can he, Daniel, based on how that clause is structured and the other things I found in these documents, I'd say he's probably been planning to do just that for a long time. Look here." He opened another document. "From the first venture capital investment in 2020. Same language, slightly different, but the effect is the same. And here," he pulled out the original 2009 shareholders agreement, the one Marcus and I had signed in the crappy attorney's office when we started. "Shotgun clause. Either founder can force a sale by buying the other's shares or selling their own." My brain was struggling to process. But we're brothers. Why would he put those clauses in if he wasn't planning on using them? Unless... The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. Unless he was planning this all along. Robert looked at me with something that resembled pity. "Daniel, there's more. Much more. Your brother has positioned himself carefully over the years. He's the CEO. He has the investor relationships. He's the public face of the company. Most importantly, he has effective control of the board, the 3 private equity representatives. They'll vote as Marcus says because he's their CEO, the guy they believe is driving the business. And there's these." He pushed a set of printed emails. "I gained access to some communications through informal discovery. Your brother has been exchanging emails with investors for months about concerns about the co-founder, about how you're supposedly resistant to change, not suited to the company's scale phase, better suited for a senior technical role than executive leadership." I picked up the emails with trembling hands and began to read. There it was, in black and white, my brother's complete betrayal. He had spent months, maybe years, meticulously building a narrative for investors that I was a problem, an obstacle, someone who needed to be removed for the good of the company, and he had done it while smiling at me, calling me bro, pretending we were partners. One email in particular cut me like a knife. It was from Marcus to Richard Sterling of Private Equity, dated 3 months ago. "Rich, I understand your concerns about timing. I agree that we need to resolve Daniel's situation before the next round of funding. He's my brother, and that makes everything more difficult emotionally. But at the end of the day, we need to do what's best for the business. I've been working with our attorney to structure a purchase offer that's fair, but also makes it clear it's non-negotiable. Ideally, we can resolve this amicably. If not, we have the contractual clauses to force it. Either he agrees to be bought out, or we'll have to take more drastic measures." "More drastic measures," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Robert nodded. "This usually means firing you from all operational roles, isolating you completely from company decisions, and then using this as evidence that you're no longer actively contributing, justifying a lower buyout price for your shares. It's a common tactic in founder disputes, brutal but legal if structured correctly." I dropped the papers on the table and sank into my chair, all the air leaving my lungs. 15 years working side by side with my brother, trusting him completely, and all the while he was planning to betray me. It wasn't a recent decision, not something that arose because the company changed or grew too large. It was a long-term plan, executed with surgical precision to steal from me the company I had created. "How much time do I have?" I finally asked. Robert consulted his notes. "Based on the communications timeline and what I know about private equity processes, I'd say you have between 4 and 8 weeks before they make a formal offer or initiate proceedings to remove you. They'll probably wait until after the September board meeting, use that meeting to document more evidence of misalignment." He paused, studying me. "Daniel, I need to ask, what do you want to do? You can accept the buyout, probably get between $30 and $40 million depending on the valuation, and move on. It's not what you deserve, it's not fair, but you'd come out rich. Or we can fight. Sue for breach of fiduciary duty, bad faith, potentially fraud. But it will be expensive. It will take years. It will destroy your relationship with your family, and there's no guarantee of victory." I sat in that frigid, air-conditioned room, staring at the city view through Robert's office windows, and felt something shift inside me. The sadness, the confusion, the denial, all of it was being burned away by something hotter, more focused. Anger, not the explosive, irrational anger that makes you do stupid things, but a cold, calculating, patient anger. Marcus had been plotting my destruction for years. Well, two could play that game, and I had an advantage he didn't. He'd underestimated me for so long, seen me as the foolish, overconfident younger brother he hadn't seen coming. "Robert," I said, my voice firmer than it had felt in months, "I want war, but not the kind he expects. I don't want to sue yet. I want to find out exactly what he did, gather evidence of it all, and then destroy him the way he tried to destroy me. Completely. Will you help me with that?" Robert Chen had seen a lot in his career, but even he seemed surprised by the transformation he saw on my face. A slow smile spread across his face, the kind of smile a predator makes when it finds worthy prey. "Daniel, I thought you'd never ask. I'm going to need a $100,000 retainer, and you need to be prepared for what we'll find. When you start really digging into someone's life, especially someone so close to you, you'll discover things you wish you didn't know. Are you sure you want to do this?" I didn't even have to think. I grabbed my checkbook, wrote the $100,000 check right there and handed it to him. Absolutely sure. My brother wants to oust me from my own company? He wants to steal 15 years of work from me? Then he'll learn that the nerdy brother he always looked down on may be far more dangerous than he ever imagined. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of my life. Robert Chen wasn't kidding when he said he needed a $100,000 retainer. He assembled a small but lethal team, a private investigator named Mike Torres, who had been a Portland police detective for 20 years, a digital forensics analyst named Sarah Kim, who could find anything on any computer, and a second attorney specializing in corporate fraud named Patricia Wells. Everyone was sworn to absolute secrecy, signed NDAs tighter than the CIA's, and understood we were hunting something big. I gave him full access to all my corporate emails, my personal backups of conversations with Marcus over the years, my meeting notes, everything. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. While Robert's team worked behind the scenes, I had to do the hardest thing of my life, pretend nothing had changed. I continued to go to the office every day, smile at Marcus, attend meetings, and act like the obedient and slightly naive CTO he thought I was. It was psychological torture. Every time he called me bro, every time he put his hand on my shoulder with that fake smile, every time he pretended to care about my opinion before completely ignoring me, I felt my stomach churn. But I bit my tongue, smiled back, and played my part perfectly. Marcus couldn't suspect a thing until I was ready to pounce. The first major discovery came from Sarah Kim, our digital forensics expert. She had gained access to the company's email backups using credentials I held as CTO, something Marcus had probably forgotten I still possessed. Sarah spent 5 days combing through years of communications and found a gold mine. Marcus hadn't been as careful as he thought. She found entire email threads between Marcus and venture capital and private equity investors in which he systematically smeared me, exaggerated his own contributions, and actively worked to marginalize me. But more than that, she found something far more sinister. Emails between Marcus and a San Francisco-based valuation consultant dated 6 months ago, discussing methods to legally minimize minority equity valuation in preparation for buyout. Robert Chen nearly jumped out of his chair when I showed him these emails. "This is gold, Daniel, pure gold. Your brother was literally conspiring to manipulate the valuation of your share of the company before he even made you an offer. This is not only unethical, it could be securities fraud, depending on how it was executed. If we can prove he actually implemented any of these tactics, we have a potential criminal case, not just a civil one." Patricia Wells, the fraud attorney, agreed. "I'll need more evidence of concrete actions, not just discussions. But this is already a complete game changer. With this, we can not only defend you from a buyout, but potentially turn the tide completely and force Marcus out." The second discovery came from Mike Torres, our private investigator, and this one was personal in a way that made me physically ill. Mike had started by doing a basic financial investigation on Marcus, looking at public bank accounts, property records, that sort of thing. But Mike was good at what he did, and he began to notice strange patterns. Marcus was spending far more money than his CEO salary would justify, even with the generous bonuses the board had approved. The Lake Oswego mansion had cost $3.2 million paid in cash. The Porsche, $140,000, also in cash. Mike dug deeper and found the answer, and when he told me in a 10 p.m. meeting in Robert's office, because we couldn't risk being seen together during the day, I felt my world crumble all over again. "Daniel," Mike said, pushing financial documents across the conference table, "your brother has been selling company shares to secondary investors for the past 3 years, small amounts at a time, always below the thresholds that would require board approval or full disclosure. In total, he sold about 8% of his original stake, generating approximately $14 million in cash." I blinked, trying to process. "But is that legal? Can he do that?" Robert sighed. "Technically, yes, if done correctly and properly disclosed. But here's the problem. You, as co-founder, should have the right of first refusal on any sale of Marcus's shares. It's in the original 2009 shareholder agreement." I pulled out the shareholders' agreement, that document Marcus and I had signed 15 years ago when we were young and idealistic and thought we were an invincible team. There it was, Clause 7.3, right of first refusal. If either founder wanted to sell their shares, they had to first offer them to the other founder on the same terms before selling to anyone else. "He's never offered me anything," I said, my voice dead. "Not once in 3 years. He didn't even tell me he was selling." Patricia Wells took the plunge. "This is a direct violation of the shareholders' agreement. Every sale he made without offering you first is technically void. We can potentially undo all of these transactions, which would be a massive legal nightmare for him and the buyers. More importantly, it demonstrates a clear pattern of bad faith and breach of fiduciary duty. This immensely strengthens any case we build." But Mike wasn't finished, and what came next was the part that really destroyed me. "Daniel, you have one more thing. One of the people Marcus sold shares to was Jennifer." It took a second for the name to register. "Jennifer? My ex-girlfriend Jennifer? The graphic designer?" Mike nodded grimly. "The same one. In April 2021, 6 months after you broke up." "There's more," Mike continued, his voice gentle but relentless. Jennifer and Marcus have been seen together multiple times over the past 2 years. Dinners, events. They were once seen leaving the same hotel in Seattle. I can't confirm the exact nature of their relationship, but... He didn't need to finish the sentence. I was looking at photos Mike had taken, surveillance photos of Marcus and Jennifer at an expensive Italian restaurant in the Pearl District, sitting very close, her laughing at something he said, his hand covering hers on the table. The date in the corner of the photo, 2 weeks ago. "That son of a bitch," I whispered. "That son of a bitch stole my girlfriend, used her to monitor me, and then paid her with shares of my own company." Robert let the silence linger for a moment before speaking. "Daniel, I know this is a lot to process. I know it's personal and painful, but from a legal standpoint, this is really helpful. It demonstrates the lengths Marcus was willing to go to manipulate and control you, using your romantic relationship as an intelligence tool. That's bordering on psychopathy. A jury will hate that if we get to trial. More importantly, Jennifer is now a potential witness. If she sold for less than fair market value, it could be considered a bribe or a disguised kickback. We can use this as leverage to get her to testify about what Marcus told her, what he asked her to do regarding you." The following weeks were a blur of discoveries, each worse than the last. Sarah Kim discovered that Marcus had used company funds to pay personal expenses, creatively but fraudulently classifying them as business expenses. We're talking $400,000 over 3 years in client meals that were actually personal dinners, business trips that were vacations, consulting fees that were payments to friends who did nothing. Mike Torres discovered that Marcus had a second apartment in San Francisco that he kept secret, registered in the name of an LLC, where he apparently stayed during his frequent business trips to the Bay Area. And what was he doing there? Well, Mike got photos of Marcus entering that apartment late at night with not 1, not 2, but 3 different women on separate occasions, none of them Jennifer. "Your brother is living a complete double life," Mike told me during one of our secret meetings. "The Marcus, who is the respected CEO, your parents' golden son, the devoted brother who is taking care of the company. This is a complete facade. The real Marcus is siphoning money from the company, betraying any trust anyone places in him, using and manipulating people like pawns. And he wasn't just doing this to you, Daniel. I have evidence that he also defrauded early venture capital investors, inflating growth metrics in 2020 to achieve a higher valuation. This is true securities fraud, and it can land you in jail." I should have felt some satisfaction in discovering all this, in knowing I had plenty of ammunition to destroy Marcus, but all I felt was a deep emptiness and a sadness that physically ached. Then came the September board meeting, the one Robert had predicted Marcus would use to create more evidence of my alleged misalignment and inadequacy. I was prepared this time. I had a tiny microphone recording everything in my blazer pocket, completely legal in Oregon, which is a one-party consent state for recording. I had reviewed with Robert exactly how to conduct myself. Professional, calm, non-defensive, but also not a doormat. "Let Marcus hang himself," Robert had instructed me. "If he attacks you or belittles you in front of the board, let him do it. It will only make things worse for him later." The meeting started out normal, a review of financials, a discussion of sales performance. Then we got to the agenda item I knew was coming, an executive leadership framework discussion. Marcus cleared his throat, that performative gesture he always made when he was about to give an important speech. "Guys, I want to address an elephant in the room we've been avoiding for too long. Daniel is my brother. I love him, and he's technically brilliant. No one questions that. But as we scale to a $200 million company working toward a potential IPO, we need to be honest about leadership fit. He paused, looking around the table at the three private equity representatives, at Trevor the CPO, at our CFO, who had been hired 6 months ago. He didn't look at me. Daniel has been increasingly resistant to the changes we need to make. He clings to old technical architectures when we need to modernize. He questions product decisions that Trevor, our expert, is making. He misses important meetings, doesn't respond to emails in a timely manner, and frankly has created a toxic environment for the engineering team. Every word was a carefully constructed lie, but delivered with such conviction, with such feigned concern in his voice, that if I hadn't known the truth, even I would have believed it. Richard Sterling, the private equity guy, nodded thoughtfully. "Marcus, what specifically are you proposing?" Marcus sighed as if the next part was painful for him. "I think we need to transition Daniel from CTO to a more senior individual contributor role. A distinguished engineer, perhaps, or a technical fellow. Still well paid, still important, but without management responsibilities or strategic decision-making. And then hire an outside CTO who is aligned with where we need to go." The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for an explosion, a meltdown, something. I took a deep breath, remembered Robert's instructions, and spoke in the calmest, most professional voice I could muster. "Marcus, I completely disagree with your characterization of my work and behavior. I've been present at every meeting, responded to every email, and my technical concerns are valid and based on 15 years of experience building this product. That said, I understand this is a board discussion, and I will respect any decision you make. I just want it to be on record that I consider this move premature and detrimental to the company." Short, dignified, and unemotional. I saw the frustration flash across Marcus's face. He wanted me to explode. He wanted me to appear unstable and emotional. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Richard Sterling intervened. "Daniel, I appreciate your professionalism. This isn't a final decision today, but something the board needs to seriously consider in the coming weeks. Perhaps you and Marcus should have some private conversations about this first." It was a diplomatic way out, but I knew what was coming next. In the coming weeks, Marcus would make his buyout offer, packaged as an amicable solution. "Accept a few million, leave quietly, let your brother keep the company." If I refused, they would use this board meeting and other fabricated evidence to force me out, no matter what. It was a perfect plan, really. Except Marcus didn't know every word of this meeting was being recorded. He didn't know I had uncovered all his fraud, all his manipulations, all his legal and ethical violations. He didn't know that his silly younger brother had become his worst nightmare. After that meeting, Marcus asked me to stay. When everyone left, he closed the conference room door and sat in the chair next to me, not at the head of the table where he always sat during board meetings. It was a calculated move to appear informal, brotherly. "Bro," he began, and the casual use of the word made me want to vomit. I know that was hard to hear, but it's coming from a place of love. You built something incredible, but the company has grown beyond the capabilities of any of us individually. There's no shame in that. I've had to constantly evolve to stay ahead myself." He paused, as if what came next was truly difficult for him to say. "I've been thinking, what if we make this easier for everyone? I have some investors who are interested in buying you out. I can guarantee you $35 million cash settlement in 60 days. You walk away rich, no drama, no lawsuits, and you can start whatever you want. New company, retire at 41, travel the world, whatever you want, bro. $35 million. My share of the company was worth at least $55 million, probably more, but Marcus was offering $35 and thinking I was too stupid to know the difference. Or he was counting on me being so emotionally destroyed I'd accept anything just to escape. I looked at my brother, this man I'd adored my entire life, this man who had systematically betrayed me in every way possible, and felt a cold calm settle over me. "Let me think about it," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "It's a big decision. Can I give you an answer next week?" Marcus smiled, that charming smile that always got what he wanted. "Sure, bro. Take your time. But between us, it would be better for everyone, especially you, if we resolve this amicably. The alternative would be uncomfortable." There was the veiled threat hidden behind brotherly concern. "Accept the buyout, or we'll force you out in an ugly and public way." I left that meeting, drove to Robert Chen's office, and played the recording. When it finished, Robert was grinning like a shark who'd just smelled blood in the water. "He threatened you, on tape. He offered a buyout that's clearly below fair market value, also on tape. Daniel, you have everything you need now. Documentary evidence of fraud, breach of shareholder agreement, embezzlement of corporate funds, and now recordings of him threatening you and trying to force you into an unfair sale. The time has come to decide. Do you just want to protect yourself, secure a fair buyout and leave? Or do you want real revenge? Do you want to destroy your brother the way he tried to destroy you?" I looked out Robert's office window at the city of Portland below, the city where Marcus and I grew up, where we built our dreams together, where he had systematically stolen everything from me. "Revenge," I said, and felt something dark and satisfying settle in my chest. "I want complete revenge. I want Marcus out of the company I built. I want him publicly disgraced. I want him criminally liable if possible. I want him to feel a fraction of the pain he caused me. And I want to do it in a way he never sees coming, the way he did to me for 15 years. Robert, you told me that when I started digging, I'd find things I wish I didn't know. You were right. But you know what else I discovered? That I have a capacity for calculated cruelty I never knew existed. My brother has underestimated the nerd his entire life. Let's show him what a mistake that was." Robert Chen had 40 years of experience in complex corporate litigation, had seen billion-dollar frauds, and had destroyed Fortune 500 CEOs. But even he seemed struck by the coolness in my voice at that moment. "Okay then," he said, pulling out a yellow legal pad and starting to make notes. "Let's plan this like a military operation. We need perfect timing, perfect sequencing, and flawless execution. One wrong move, and Marcus will run to his lawyers and lock everything up in years-long litigation. But if we do it right, we can knock him out before he even understands what happened." We spent the next 4 hours in that conference room, Robert, Patricia Wells, and Mike Torres, drawing on the whiteboard what I can only describe as a declaration of all-out war. The plan we devised had multiple layers, each designed to hit Marcus from a different angle simultaneously, giving him no time to breathe or counterattack. First, we would meticulously document everything. Sarah Kim would continue her digital forensics, but now with a specific focus on finding concrete evidence of securities fraud and embezzlement. Mike Torres would intensify his surveillance of Marcus, documenting every movement, every suspicious meeting, building a complete timeline of his activities. Patricia Wells would begin preparing the legal documents, not only to defend me from a forced buyout, but to actively take control of the situation. And me? My job was to remain the confident, slightly naive brother Marcus thought he knew, while secretly preparing the battlefield. The second phase of the plan was where things got really interesting, and it was here that Robert showed why he charged $800 an hour. "Daniel, your brother has a fundamental weakness in this entire operation of his," Robert explained, pointing to the company's organizational chart we'd drawn on the whiteboard. "He's assumed that investors are completely on his side, that you have no allies on the board, that the entire company sees him as the indispensable leader. But that's only true because he's controlled the narrative. What happens when we show investors that their CEO is a fraudster? That he's embezzled funds, lied about you for personal gain, violated contractual agreements multiple times. Private equity doesn't have loyalty to people, Daniel. They have loyalty to returns. If we can convince them that Marcus is a massive legal and reputational risk, they'll throw him under the bus so fast it'll make your head spin. This meant we needed to assemble an absolutely irrefutable dossier, not just evidence good enough for a legal case, but evidence so clear and devastating that even an investor with no legal background would look at it and immediately grasp its gravity. Patricia took the lead on this, creating what she called the Marcus Cooper Fraud Portfolio, a 127-page document with color-coded tabs, each detailing a different category of misconduct. Red tab, shareholder agreement violations. Blue tab, embezzlement of corporate funds. Green tab, securities fraud and metrics manipulation. Yellow tab, breaches of fiduciary duties. Orange tab, evidence of conspiracy to force my exit through illegal means. It was a legal masterpiece, truly, and cost another $75,000 in fees, but each page was a nuclear bomb. Meanwhile, I had to play my part in the company. Marcus had given me a week to think about his buyout offer. So 4 days after that awful board meeting, I arranged to meet him for lunch at an Italian restaurant he liked in Northwest Portland. I'd deliberately chosen a public place, a place where he'd feel comfortable and in control, where he'd think he was manipulating me once again. I arrived 5 minutes late, looking tired and defeated, which wasn't hard to fake considering I was sleeping 3 hours a night while plotting my revenge. Marcus was already seated, sipping an Aperol Spritz, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Danny," he greeted me, using the childhood nickname he knew I hated but insisted on using when he wanted to make me feel small. "I'm glad you wanted to talk. I ordered that Chianti you like. It's on its way." He was charming, attentive, the perfect brother. He made me want to reach across the table and punch that fake smile right off his face, but I smiled back, sat down, and let my shoulders slump in defeat. "Marcus, I've been thinking a lot about the offer, about everything." I paused, looking down at my hands as if what I was about to say was painful. "I think you're right. The company has grown too big. I'm not the right person to take it to the next level, and honestly, I'm tired, bro. Tired of the politics, the meetings, of feeling like I no longer belong in the place I helped build." I saw triumph flash in Marcus's eyes so quickly that if I hadn't been looking for it, I would have missed it. He leaned forward, placing his hand on my arm in a gesture that was supposed to be comforting but made my skin crawl. "Danny, I know this is hard, but you're making the right choice, man. $35 million, bro. You can do anything. Maybe take a gap year, travel, find what truly makes you happy without all this pressure." He was practically vibrating with barely contained excitement, probably already counting the money he'd save by buying me for $20 million below its true value. "But I have some concerns about the terms," I continued, seeing his expression harden slightly. $35 million seem low. I mean, on paper, my stake is worth at least 50. And I have some debts I need to pay off. Taxes will be huge. I was wondering if we could get to 45. Marcus's mask slipped for just a second, and I saw genuine anger flash across his face before he regained his smile. "Danny, 35 is already generous considering the circumstances. You have to understand there are complications. If this becomes contentious, if you force the board into a formal evaluation, they will consider the fact that you are no longer performing real executive duties. That will lower the value significantly." There was the threat again, more explicit this time. "Accept the 35 or we risk much worse." I put on a worried expression, biting my lip as if I were truly considering it. "How long do I have to decide?" Marcus relaxed again. "Give me your final answer by Friday. I have the documents practically ready." We can sign next week, money in your account in 60 days, and you can start your new life. Clean break, no hard feelings. We're still brothers after all. We're still brothers." The words were ash in my mouth, but I forced a grateful smile. "Okay, I'll give you my answer on Friday." We toasted with wine I'd barely touched at pasta that tasted like cardboard to me, and Marcus spent the rest of lunch talking about his plans for the company after I left, as if I actually cared, as if he wasn't rubbing salt in the wound with every word. When we were finished, and he insisted on paying the bill, because of course he did, he hugged me as we left the restaurant. "Proud of you for making the mature choice, bro," he whispered in my ear. It took every ounce of self-control not to tell him that on Friday he would find out exactly how mature my choice had been. That night, back in Robert's office, I recounted every word of the lunch conversation. "Perfect," Robert said, smiling. "He thinks he won. He thinks you'll sign. That means he'll let his guard down this week, start making plans assuming you're out. That gives us the perfect window." Patricia had finished the dossier and was now preparing something even more lethal. A formal letter to the board members and key investors, delivered by courier and email simultaneously, detailing all of Marcus's wrongdoing and formally questioning his suitability to continue as CEO. The letter would also inform them that I was exercising my contractual rights under the shareholders' agreement and demanding a special board meeting within 5 business days. But before sending that letter, we had to neutralize Marcus's greatest weapon, his narrative. If we simply accused him without laying the groundwork, he would use his charm and connections to turn the board against me, painting it all as a bitter and jealous brother trying to destroy the successful CEO. Then Mike Torres had a brilliant idea. What if we strategically leaked some of this information before the formal letter? Not all of it, just enough to plant doubts, make people start questioning Marcus, so that when the real bombshell drops, there's already a context of suspicion. It was risky, but brilliant. If we could get the Portland tech ecosystem to start asking questions about Marcus before he even knew we were attacking, he'd be defending lost ground from the start. Mike had contacts at various tech publications, blogs, and podcasts. Nothing mainstream, but the kind of outlets industry insiders religiously followed. He began leaking small things, always through anonymous sources, always carefully calibrated so as not to be obviously traced back to me. A tip to a blogger about strange discrepancies in Cooper Brothers Tech's public financials. A question planted on a podcast about why the company's technical co-founder was never mentioned in interviews. A rumor circulating at networking events about the CEO living a lifestyle that seemed incompatible with his reported salary. Nothing was explicitly accusatory. Everything was phrased as curiosity or genuine concern, but the effect was exactly what we wanted. People started talking. For 3 days, while Marcus thought I was at home agonizing over accepting his garbage offer, the Portland tech ecosystem was quietly beginning to question the Golden Boy. I received LinkedIn messages from other entrepreneurs asking thoughtful questions about the leadership dynamics at the company. A reporter from the Portland Business Journal asked me for an interview about the untold story of the founders of Cooper Brothers Tech. Even our CFO, a woman named Rebecca Chen, who had been hired by Marcus and whom I assumed was loyal to him, sent me a casual email asking if I wanted to grab coffee to catch up. I politely declined for now, not wanting to show my hand too soon, but the fact that she had asked meant the cracks were starting to show. On Thursday night, less than 24 hours before I was supposed to give my final answer to Marcus about the buyout, Sarah Kim called me at 11 p.m., her voice trembling with excitement. "Daniel, I found it. I found the smoking gun. You need to come to Robert's office now. This can't wait." I drove through the deserted downtown Portland, my heart pounding, wondering what could possibly be so big that Sarah, who had seen months of damning evidence, was acting like she'd found the Holy Grail. When I arrived, Robert, Patricia, Mike and Sarah were all gathered around her laptop, expressions of shock mixed with something that looked almost like predatory glee on their faces. "Show him," Robert said, and Sarah turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was an email thread between Marcus and Richard Sterling of Private Equity, dated 2 months ago, which Sarah had finally managed to decrypt from an archived backup. I began reading, and with each line, I felt my breath grow shallower. Marcus wasn't just planning to force me out with an undervalued buyout. He was planning something much, much worse. The email detailed a scheme where, after removing me, Marcus would restructure the company through a merger with a shell corporation he secretly controlled, effectively taking Cooper Brothers Tech private again under his complete control and diluting all other investors. It was massive securities fraud, not just against me, but against everyone who had invested millions in the company. "This isn't just civil, Daniel," Patricia said, her voice tense. "This is criminal, federal securities fraud. If we can prove he was actually planning to do this, we're talking about potentially 5 to 10 years in prison." Sarah clicked to the next email in the thread. "It gets better. Look at Sterling's response." I read it and almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. Richard Sterling, the senior representative of the $500 million private equity fund, hadn't rejected Marcus's plan. He'd said it was interesting but needed to be structured very carefully to avoid legal red flags, and suggested they involve an attorney specializing in creative transactions. They were all involved. It wasn't just Marcus. It was a conspiracy involving the investors who were supposed to be protecting the interests of all shareholders. "This changes everything," Robert said, standing up and pacing the office, his legal mind clearly working in overdrive. "We're not just taking down Marcus, we're potentially taking down the entire private equity fund. This will be federal, SEC involved, probably FBI for criminal investigation. Daniel, do you understand the magnitude of what we've found?" I did. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something besides anger and pain. I felt hope. Not just hope of defending myself or getting revenge against my brother, but hope of truly reclaiming what was mine, of cleaning up the rot completely, of rebuilding Cooper Brothers Tech, or better yet, Daniel Cooper Tech, the way it always should have been. "What's the next step?" I asked, my voice firm for the first time in weeks. Robert stopped walking and looked at me, that shark-like grin back on his face. "Tomorrow morning you'll meet Marcus as planned. You'll tell him you accept his offer. You'll smile, shake his hand, and make him believe he won. In the meantime, we'll be delivering our complete dossier, including this new evidence, not only to the board, but directly to the SEC and the FBI. By the time Marcus sits down to dinner tomorrow night to celebrate his victory, he'll have federal agents knocking on his door. And you, Daniel, you'll finally watch your brother get exactly what he deserves." I got home at 3 in the morning, my brain too buzzing to sleep. I sat on the porch of my West Hills house, staring at the city lights below, and thought about everything that had happened in the last 2 months. How I had gone from a confident idiot who couldn't see the betrayal happening right in front of me to someone capable of orchestrating the systematic destruction of his own brother. Part of me, a small and dwindling part, felt guilty. We were family. We grew up together. Our parents would be devastated. But then I remembered 15 years of manipulation, of Jennifer being used against me, of Marcus stealing my credit, my money, my company, of him planning not only to remove me, but to defraud millions of dollars from investors in the process. And the guilt evaporated, replaced by an ice-cold determination. Friday dawned bright and sunny, one of those perfect Portland fall days that makes you understand why people fall in love with this city. I showered, dressed in my best suit, looked in the mirror, and practiced my smile. I had to sell this perfectly. One bad performance, and Marcus might get suspicious, might run, might start hiding evidence, or hire lawyers before the authorities arrived. I drove to the company's offices for the last time as CTO of Cooper Brothers Tech. At least that's what Marcus thought. He'd scheduled our meeting for 10 a.m. in the main conference room and had even bought champagne to celebrate my surrender. When I walked in, he was there with his attorney, the buyout documents spread out on the polished mahogany desk, that predatory smile of a winner plastered across his face. "Danny, today's the day, bro, the start of your new life." He came to hug me, and it was all I could do not to flinch. I hugged him back, patted him on the back, and sat in the chair he indicated. "So," his attorney, a lanky guy named Martin Pierce, began, "we've reviewed everything. $35 million, payable in 2 installments, the first of $15 million at closing, the remaining $20 million in 45 days. In exchange, you transfer all your shares to the acquiring entity controlled by Marcus, resign all positions in the company, and sign a 3-year non-compete agreement and a comprehensive NDA." I took the documents, pretending to read them carefully while secretly checking my phone under the table. There was a message from Robert. "Packages delivered to the SEC at 9 a.m. FBI notified at 9:30 a.m. Agents en route to Marcus's office and residence. ETA 90 minutes. Keep him there." I looked up and smiled at my brother one last time. "Where do I sign?" The pen was heavy in my hand when I picked it up. Marcus was practically vibrating with barely contained excitement. His attorney, Martin Pierce, had already opened the bottle of champagne that was chilling in an ice bucket in the corner of the room. It was surreal, this moment. Here I was about to sign documents that would supposedly oust me from my own company for $20 million less than I deserved, while at the same moment federal agents were literally on their way to arrest the man sitting across from me. The man who had once been my hero, the man who had shared my room for 18 years, the man I now hated with every fiber of my being. I put the pen to the paper and paused, looking at Marcus with the most sincere expression I could muster. "Before I sign, I just want to say one thing," I began, and saw a flash of concern cross Marcus's face. He probably thought I was going to make an emotional scene, that I was going to start crying or begging for more money. "I want you to know I have no hard feelings, bro. You were right about everything. The company outgrew me. I was holding you guys back, and honestly, I'm relieved. These last few years have been so stressful, so hard. I'll finally be able to breathe again, you know, travel, maybe find someone special, start a family, the things that really matter." Every word was poison disguised as honey, and I knew Marcus was drinking it all in, his ego being stroked exactly the way he liked it. Marcus stood and walked over to me, placing both hands on my shoulders, looking into my eyes with that false intensity he'd perfected over the years. "Danny, you have no idea how much it means to hear you say that. I was so worried it would destroy our relationship, that you'd hate me. But in the end, we're brothers, man. Nothing is more important than that, and I promise I'll make this company shine even brighter. I'll make you proud of what we've built together." We built together. The words were so absurd, so disconnected from reality, that I almost laughed in his face. But I held myself back, gave a shaky, grateful smile, and finally signed my name on each line marked with an X. Daniel Cooper. Daniel Cooper. Daniel Cooper. 9 pages, 32 signatures in total. When I finished, Martin Pierce efficiently gathered the documents, checking each signature, and then extended his hand to me. "Congratulations on your next adventure, Daniel. Marcus will process the paperwork immediately, and you'll have the first $15 million in your account in less than a week." Marcus picked up the champagne bottle and began pouring 3 glasses, the foam spilling over the rim. "A toast," he announced, his voice filled with barely concealed triumph. "To Danny, to the incredible past we shared, and to the brilliant future we both will have. To the Cooper brothers." We raised our glasses, the crystal clinking, and I took a small sip of the expensive champagne that tasted like ash in my mouth. Marcus downed the entire glass in one go, already pouring a second. I glanced discreetly at the clock on the wall. 10:45 in the morning. According to Robert's timeline, the federal agents were due to arrive around noon. I needed to keep Marcus occupied and in the office for at least another hour. "So," I said, leaning back in my chair with studied casualness, "what are your plans now? For the company, that is. Without my technical objections, I imagine you'll accelerate that aggressive roadmap Trevor has been proposing." Marcus's eyes lit up. He loved to talk about his plans, his grand visions. It was pure narcissism, and I was about to let him talk himself into a metaphorical stranglehold, keeping him distracted while the clock ticked. "Oh man, you have no idea," Marcus began, sitting on the edge of the conference table in a casual manner that he probably thought sounded confident, but actually sounded smug. "First, we're going to accelerate our expansion into San Francisco and Seattle. I already have offices lined up. We're going to hire aggressively. Second, I'm negotiating a strategic partnership with an enterprise software company that will give us access to Fortune 500 customers. And third," he paused dramatically, "I'm in preliminary talks about a potential acquisition of a smaller competitor in Austin. If we pull this off, we'd be looking at revenues of $50 million by the end of next year. A valuation of $400 million easy. Maybe even consider an IPO in 2025. I forced an impressed expression, asked the right questions, and let Marcus talk and talk. He was so absorbed in his own narrative, so convinced of his own genius, that he didn't even notice when my phone vibrated discreetly in my pocket. I waited for an appropriate moment when Marcus paused for more champagne to quickly check. Message from Robert. "Agents entering the building now. 2 to the office, 2 to his residence. Leave the room in 3 minutes and leave him alone. We want agents to catch him unaware." My heart began to race, adrenaline coursing through my veins. It was really happening. After 2 months of planning, of pain, of horrific discoveries, it was finally happening. "Marcus, sorry to interrupt," I said, setting my empty glass down. "I need to use the restroom quickly. I guess the champagne didn't sit well with an empty stomach." Marcus waved dismissively. Sure. Actually, let me check my emails in the meantime. I have a call with the guys from San Francisco in 15 minutes anyway." Perfect. I left the conference room, walked down the hallway with measured steps as every instinct in my body screamed to run, and turned the corner out of sight. Instead of going to the restroom, I went straight to my office, locked the door, and waited. Through the partially opaque glass walls, I could see the main reception area of our floor, and then I saw them. 4 people in dark suits, 2 women and 2 men, all with that unmistakable presence of federal law enforcement. Our receptionist, a young woman named Katie, was clearly confused and slightly alarmed. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see one of the men flashing a badge, seeing Katie's face turn pale, seeing her point nervously toward the conference room where Marcus was probably still checking emails, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. The 4 agents headed in that direction, their movements professional and efficient. My phone rang. It was Robert. "Daniel, where are you?" he asked urgently. "In my office, watching everything," I replied, my voice calmer than I felt. "They just came in." Robert took a deep breath. "Okay, stay where you are. Don't interfere, don't get involved yet. Let them do their job. You'll have time to talk later if necessary. And Daniel, congratulations. You made it." Through the glass walls, I watched the agents enter the conference room. I saw Marcus look up from his phone, his expression changing from confusion to concern. I saw one of the agents say something, flash his badge, hand over what appeared to be a set of documents. I saw the color drain completely from my brother's face as he began to read. I saw his hands begin to shake. I saw him look around the room as if searching for a way out. His eyes eventually landing on his attorney, Martin Pierce, who had stood and was clearly trying to comprehend what was happening. And then I saw the exact moment Marcus understood. The moment he realized he'd been caught, that his entire house of cards was crumbling. He glanced at the buyout documents I'd just signed, still on the table, and then frantically looked down the hallway, searching for me. Our eyes met through the glass. I was standing in the doorway of my office now, no longer hiding. Marcus looked at me, and in that moment I saw it all flash across his face. Confusion, anger, betrayal, and finally, devastating understanding. He knew it had been me. That the silly younger brother he had underestimated his entire life had been the one who orchestrated his downfall. I saw his lips form my name, not aloud, but I could read it clearly. Daniel. And then I did something I had dreamed of doing for weeks. I smiled. Not a friendly or brotherly smile, a cold, calculated, victorious smile. And I raised my imaginary glass of champagne in a silent toast. To the Cooper brothers, Marcus, may the best man win. The next hour was controlled chaos. More federal agents arrived, along with what appeared to be digital forensics personnel. I saw Marcus being escorted out of the office, not yet in handcuffs, but clearly in custody. He tried to speak to me as he passed in the hallway, shouting my name, but the agents quickly moved him. The entire Cooper Brothers tech office was in shock, people whispering in small groups, trying to understand what was happening. Trevor, our CPO, ran out of his office looking absolutely terrified, likely realizing that his own connection to Marcus might implicate him as well. Rebecca Chen, our CFO, saw me through the glass and walked deliberately to my office, knocking on the door. "Daniel, what the hell is going on?" she asked, her voice low but intense. I opened the door and let her in, closing it behind her. "Sit down, Rebecca. There's a lot you need to know." I spent the next 20 minutes giving her a summary of everything I'd uncovered. Marcus's fraud, the embezzlement, the conspiracy to force me out, the plan to defraud all the investors. Rebecca listened in growing silence of horror, her professional CFO expression gradually replaced by one of genuine disgust. "My God," she finally said. "I knew something was wrong with some of the numbers Marcus gave me. Small inconsistencies that he always explained away with reasonable excuses. But this? Daniel, this is massive. The company may not survive this scandal." That was my concern too. I'd spent so much time focused on taking down Marcus that I hadn't fully considered what would happen next. Cooper Brothers Tech now had 85 employees, people with families, mortgages, and lives that depended on their paychecks. Customers who relied on our software for their critical business operations. Investors who had poured tens of millions of dollars into the company. If everything collapsed, it wouldn't just be Marcus who would suffer. "I won't let that happen," I said, surprised by the certainty in my voice. "Marcus tried to destroy me, but this company is mine. I built it. I coded every line of the original product. I architected every system, and I'm going to save it, even if it means rebuilding everything from scratch." Rebecca studied me for a long moment. "You planned this, didn't you? This whole operation to expose Marcus. That was you." It wasn't a question. I nodded. For 2 months, with a team of attorneys and investigators, I gathered evidence of everything he did. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, almost looking impressed. "Daniel, I've worked with many CEOs and founders in my career, and I can honestly say I've always found you too soft, too passive, too willing to let Marcus have the spotlight. But this," she gestured vaguely to the chaos outside, "that was absolutely cold and very, very clever. You protected yourself, exposed the fraud, and positioned yourself to potentially take control of everything. I'm genuinely impressed." Before I could respond, my phone rang again. An unfamiliar number, I answered cautiously. Daniel Cooper? A formal female voice asked. Yes, who is this? Special Agent Janet Morrison, FBI. I'm on the ground floor of your building. I need to speak with you about the Marcus Cooper case. Can you come down? My stomach tightened. I'd prepared for this moment. Robert had coached me extensively on how to deal with law enforcement, but it still made me nervous. I'm coming, I replied. Rebecca looked at me with concern. Do you need an attorney present? I nodded. I already have one on call. But thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for listening. I'll need your help in the next few days to stabilize the company, if you're willing. She nodded firmly. You can count on me. I always thought you should be running this company anyway. I rode the elevator down to the lobby, my mind racing. Special Agent Morrison was waiting near the building's main reception area, a woman in her 40s with hair pulled into a tight bun and unblinking eyes. She wasn't alone. Robert Chen was there too, along with Patricia Wells. Daniel, Robert greeted formally. Agent Morrison asked to speak with you. I advised you don't need to answer any questions right now, but she said it would be beneficial for you to cooperate. Agent Morrison extended his hand, which I shook. His grip was firm. Mr. Cooper, I understand this has been a difficult day for you. I want to make it clear right away that you are not a target of this investigation. In fact, the comprehensive dossier your attorneys provided this morning is the reason we were able to move so quickly. So Marcus is being charged? I asked, keeping my voice neutral, formally or just questioning. Morrison chose her words carefully. He's being questioned now about multiple serious allegations. Based on what we've seen so far in the preliminary evidence, I anticipate formal charges will be filed within 48 hours. Federal securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, each carries significant potential prison time. We're also investigating other individuals who may have been co-conspirators. Richard Sterling and the private equity fund. She was speaking of them without naming them. Anything I can do to help the investigation, I'm available, I said. Marcus Cooper defrauded not only me, but dozens of investors and employees. He needs to answer for that. Morrison nodded, satisfied with my answer. We'll be in touch in the next few days for a formal statement. For now, I would recommend that you don't speak publicly about the case, don't give interviews to the media, and definitely don't try to contact your brother directly. Brother, the word still stung, even after everything. I'm fine with that, Agent Morrison. I have nothing to say to Marcus Cooper. She studied me for a moment, and I thought I saw something like sympathy flash across her professional expression. What's it worth, Mr. Cooper, cases like this where family is involved? They're always the hardest. But you did the right thing by coming forward. Many victims of fraud, especially when the perpetrator is family, choose to look the other way. You chose justice. That takes courage. After Morrison left, Robert and Patricia took me to a cafe across the street. We sat in a secluded corner, and Robert ordered 3 double espressos. You did perfectly, Daniel. Exactly as we rehearsed. Morrison is clearly on your side, seeing you as a cooperative victim, not a participant. That's crucial, Patricia agreed. And those buyout documents you signed this morning, completely void now, signed under false pretenses, part of a larger fraud scheme. No judge in the country will consider those documents valid. You keep your shares, your positions, everything. This was a relief, but also frightening. What happens to the company now? The board will panic. Investors will want to pull their money. Customers will be worried. I've thought about it, Robert said, pulling out his iPad and opening a document. We need an aggressive and immediate communications strategy. First, you need to call an emergency board meeting. You can do this as majority shareholder now that Marcus is effectively removed. Second, you need a public statement to employees, customers, and partners. And third, you need to position yourself as the stable leader who will guide the company through this crisis. Daniel, Whether you like it or not, you are the CEO now. De facto, if not yet, officially. It's time to stop being the invisible CTO and become the face of the company. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I, who had always avoided the spotlight, who had let Marcus be the public face while I stayed behind the scenes, now had to step out and lead publicly. I spent the rest of that afternoon in Robert's office, working with a crisis PR firm Patricia knew, crafting carefully worded communications. An internal email to all Cooper Brothers tech employees, signed by me as co-founder and CTO, explaining that Marcus had been placed on leave due to serious allegations of financial misconduct under investigation by federal authorities, that the company was cooperating fully and that operations would continue as normal under interim leadership. A more vague public statement to the press, explaining the company's commitment to the highest ethical standards and transparency, and personalized emails to each board member and key investors, requesting an emergency meeting for Monday morning. When I finally returned home at 10 p.m. that Friday, I was exhausted in a way that went beyond the physical. It was emotional, psychological, and spiritual exhaustion. I sat on my couch in the dark living room and finally let it all sink in. I had done it. I had truly done it. I had exposed my own brother, turned him over to the federal authorities, and likely destroyed my family in the process. My phone had 47 missed messages, most from numbers I didn't recognize. There were 3 from my mother, each more hysterical than the last. 2 from my father, several from co-workers, and 1, a single message from a number I recognized even though it wasn't saved. Jennifer. I opened her message with fingers trembling slightly. Daniel, I know you probably hate me now. I know you found out about me and Marcus, but you need to know. He manipulated me too. He told me things about you that weren't true, made me believe you were the problem. By the time I finally realized who he really was, it was too late. I was in too deep. I'm so sorry. If you need me to testify to help the case in any way, I will. It's the least I can do after everything. You deserve better than any of us gave you. Reading that message should have given me some satisfaction, knowing that Jennifer finally saw Marcus for who he was. But all I felt was a deep weariness. I didn't reply to her message. I didn't call my parents back, not yet. Instead, I grabbed my laptop and did the one thing that had always brought me comfort during the hardest moments of my life. I started coding. I opened the source code repository for Cooper Brothers Tech, the product I had built from scratch 15 years ago, that I had nurtured and improved and loved, even as I was losing everything else. And looking at those lines of code, seeing the elegant architecture I had created, remembering the sleepless nights and moments of inspiration that had resulted in this software that now ran critical operations for hundreds of companies, I finally understood something fundamental. Marcus hadn't built anything. He had stolen, manipulated, lied, but he had never truly created anything of value. I had. And no one, not even my own brother, could take that away from me. The weekend that followed was the most surreal of my life. Saturday morning, I woke up to my phone exploding with notifications. The story had leaked to the press, not the full details because the federal investigation was confidential, but enough to cause a frenzy. Portland Business Journal had published an article with the headline, Cooper Brothers Tech CEO stepped amid federal investigation. TechCrunch had picked up the story an hour later. Portland startup valued at 200 million faces fraud scandal. And then the calls started. Reporters, bloggers, even a producer of a true crime podcast wanting to know if I would be interviewed. I turned off my phone after the 10th call and only kept a burner Robert had given me for essential communications. The call I'd been dreading finally came on Saturday afternoon. My mom. I'd ignored her texts on Friday because I simply didn't have the emotional energy to deal with it, but I couldn't avoid it forever. I answered with a sinking feeling in my stomach. Daniel Robert Cooper, what have you done? Her voice was thick with a mixture of anger, confusion, and pain that cut deeper than I expected. "Mom, I can explain," I began, but she cut me off. "Explain? Explain how you got your own brother arrested, how you turned him in to the FBI? Marcus called me from the police station yesterday, Daniel. From the police station. He was crying, saying you set him up, that you planted evidence, that you're trying to steal his company." His company. Even now, even after everything, Marcus had managed to turn my own mother against me. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "Mom, nothing Marcus told you is true. I didn't plant anything. I discovered he was committing massive fraud, that he was stealing from the company, that he was planning to force me out and defraud all the investors. I have evidence, documents, emails, everything. Marcus isn't the victim here, Mom. He's the criminal." I heard my mother sob on the other end of the line. "You're brothers. Brothers don't do this to each other. No matter what happened, you should have resolved it as a family, not involving the government, not destroying everything he built." "Mom, he tried to destroy me first." My voice came out louder than I intended, years of frustration finally boiling over. "For 15 years he manipulated me, stole my credit, and erased me from our company's history. He was literally planning to force me to sell my shares for a fraction of their value. He used my ex-girlfriend to spy on me. He embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from the company to fund a luxury lifestyle. And when I found out about all this, he tried to threaten me into accepting a horrible settlement. What should I have done? Just accept it? Let him steal everything I worked to build?" There was a long silence on the other end. When my mother finally spoke again, her voice was quieter, but no less hurt. "Your father and I raised you two to be better than this, to protect yourselves, and now a family is destroyed." That conversation ended unresolved, just with my mother saying she needed time to process everything and hanging up. My father called me an hour later, a little more rational, but equally devastated. He was an accountant. He understood numbers and financial irregularities, so when I explained some of the details of Marcus's fraud, I saw understanding slowly sink in. "Jesus Christ, Daniel," he finally said. "If half of what you're saying is true, Marcus could go to jail." "Not half, Dad, all of it, and yes, he probably will." My father was quiet for so long, I thought the line had dropped. "This will kill your mother, you know. She always saw Marcus as, as the golden child, and you were always the quiet one, the reliable one. Now everything is upside down." I spent the rest of the weekend preparing for Monday's board meeting. Robert, Patricia, and I met in his office on Sunday, reviewing every aspect of my presentation. It wasn't just about exposing Marcus, it had to be about leadership, about vision, about convincing frightened investors that the company had a future without the fraudulent CEO. "You need to be confident but not arrogant," Robert instructed me for the 10th time. "You need to acknowledge the gravity of the situation, but project stability. And above all, you need to make it absolutely clear that you, not Marcus, have always been the true driving force behind this company. The product is yours. The technology is yours. Customers trust the software you built. Marcus was just a talented salesman who happened to be your brother." Sarah Kim had prepared a devastating presentation showing the flow of money, highlighting exactly how Marcus had embezzled funds over the years. Mike Torres had created a visual timeline of all the manipulations, from the first podcast in 2017 where Marcus began erasing my name, to the recent emails planning my forced removal. And Patricia had prepared a 15-page legal memo detailing every violation, every fraud, every crime Marcus would likely face. It was a complete arsenal, and Monday morning at 8:30, when I walked into the Cooper Brothers Tech boardroom, I was as prepared as possible for the battle ahead. The room was tense, Richard Sterling from private equity was there, looking a decade older than the last time I saw him, clearly aware that his own involvement in the emails with Marcus was under federal scrutiny. The other two representatives from the fund were also present, along with our CFO Rebecca Chen, our outside corporate attorney David Kim, and surprisingly, two people I hadn't expected, representatives from two of the original 2020 venture capital investors, the people Marcus had potentially defrauded with inflated metrics. No sign of Trevor, the CPO Marcus had hired. He was probably in hiding or had already been told by attorneys not to show up. I sat at the head of the table, the position Marcus always occupied, and for once, no one questioned me. "Good morning, everyone," I began, keeping my voice steady despite my nerves. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I know the last 72 hours have been shocking for everyone. I'll be blunt about the situation. Marcus Cooper, my brother and co-founder of this company, is under federal investigation for multiple counts of securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. I've spent the last 2 months with the assistance of legal counsel documenting his illegal actions. The full dossier was delivered to the SEC and FBI on Friday morning. Based on what I know about the strength of the evidence, I anticipate that Marcus will face formal criminal charges within days." I saw shock, if not complete surprise, flash across the faces around the table. Richard Sterling cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Daniel, you understand that some of these emails that were part of your investigation include confidential communications between Marcus and our fund, communications that may have been taken out of context." Ah, there it was. Sterling trying to hedge, trying to suggest that his compromising emails with Marcus were misunderstandings. He wasn't going to let that go. "Richard, the emails were not taken out of context. They clearly show you and Marcus discussing methods to minimize the valuation of my equity before a forced buyout. They show you being complicit in, at least considering a restructuring scheme that would have defrauded all other investors. Now, I don't know yet if you'll face criminal charges as well, but I can tell you that federal investigators are very interested in these communications." The silence that followed was absolute. Sterling turned pale. One of the other fund representatives, a woman named Karen Zhao, who had always been more reserved, spoke up. "Daniel, what are you proposing in terms of leadership going forward? Marcus may be committed, but you're CTO, not CEO. You have no experience in commercial operations, investor relations, or strategic partnerships." It was a valid objection, one I had anticipated. "You're right, Karen. I don't have the traditional CEO experience that Marcus supposedly had. But let me ask you a few questions. Who built the product this company sells? Me. Who architected the entire technology platform? Me. Who spent countless hours with customers solving technical problems and building trusting relationships? Me. Marcus was good at selling a vision, but the real substance of this company has always been the product, and the product has always been mine." Rebecca Chen, our CFO, interjected unexpectedly. "Can I add something? I've worked here for 8 months now, and in that time, I've noticed an interesting dynamic. When clients had serious issues, when large contracts were at risk, who did they ask to speak? Not Marcus. They asked Daniel, because they knew Daniel understood the product inside out, that he could solve any problem, that he gave them honest answers instead of a sales pitch. From an operations and customer satisfaction standpoint, Daniel was always more critical than Marcus. Marcus was just better at taking credit." I looked at Rebecca gratefully. She was putting her own career at risk by speaking so bluntly, but she was doing the right thing. One of the original VCs, a guy named Tom Bradford from Cascade Ventures, spoke up for the first time. "Daniel, my fund invested $5 million in this company in 2020 based on projections and metrics that Marcus presented to us. If those metrics were fraudulent, as your brief suggests, then we were misled into investing under false pretenses. This is a massive problem for us. We need to understand the full scope of the fraud and how it affects our position. This was the delicate moment. He could throw the original VCs under the bus, pointing out that they should have done better due diligence, but that would only create enemies when he needed allies. Tom, I completely understand your concern. And yes, some of the growth metrics Marcus presented in 2020 were optimistically inflated. But here's the thing. The actual product, the actual customer base, the actual revenues, all of it is solid. Marcus exaggerated the growth rate, but the fundamental business is strong. In fact, without Marcus diverting funds, our profit margin is better than the numbers you saw. That caught their attention. Rebecca nodded in confirmation. It's true. I discovered last quarter that Marcus was classifying hundreds of thousands in personal expenses as business expenses. When I remove that from the books, our operating numbers improve significantly. Karen Zhao leaned forward. Daniel, let me be blunt. Our fund invested $40 million in this company in the last round. If Marcus is removed and indicted, it will be a PR nightmare. Our own due diligence will be questioned. Potentially, our limited partners will sue. So I need to know, very clearly and honestly, can this company survive without Marcus? Can you truly lead this? Because if the answer is no, we need to start thinking about damage control, potentially an orderly liquidation before the value evaporates completely. It was the moment of truth. I took a deep breath and spoke with a conviction that came from somewhere deep within. Karen, I'm going to tell you something I should have said years ago, but I was too polite, too passive, too trusting of my brother. Marcus Cooper didn't build this company. He built it. I built this company. Every line of code in the original product was written by me. The architecture that allows us to scale to thousands of concurrent users? Mine. The integrations with other systems that our customers love? Mine. The proprietary algorithms that give us a competitive advantage? Mine. Marcus was a talented front man, but a front man can be replaced. Fundamental technology cannot. I paused, looking around the table, seeing that I had their full attention. Yes, I can lead this company. I'll hire an experienced COO to handle day-to-day operations. I'll bring in a strong VP of sales to manage that side. But the strategic vision, the product development, the relationships with key customers, those have always been mine, even when Marcus was taking the credit. And now, without him sabotaging, manipulating, and stealing, this company will finally reach the potential it always had. Tom Bradford was furiously taking notes. You mentioned hiring a COO and VP sales. That's going to cost money. A quality COO for a company this size, we're talking a base salary of $300,000 plus significant equity. A VP sales similar, and that's assuming we can attract quality talent despite the scandal. What is the company's current cash position? Rebecca responded immediately. We have $8.2 million in cash, a runway of approximately 18 months at the current burn rate. But if we need to invest in new leadership and potentially increase marketing to counter negative PR, that runway shortens. Richard Sterling, who had been quiet since my previous reprimand, finally spoke again, his voice more cautious now. Daniel, our fund obviously has serious concerns about our own exposure here. But I have to admit, looking at the evidence you've compiled, it's clear that Marcus deceived us as much as he deceived you. Possibly more so, since he was using our capital and credibility for his own purposes. It was a surprisingly honest admission, and I saw an opportunity. Richard, I understand your fund is in a difficult position, but here's what I propose. Instead of going to war with each other, which only benefits attorneys and destroys value for everyone, let's work together. You have the resources, the connections, the experience scaling companies. I have the product, the clients, the technical vision. Rebecca has proven herself to be an exceptional CFO. We have the bones of something truly special here. The story becomes not about a fraudulent CEO, but about investors and the original co-founder working together to remove the bad actor and save the company. The Wall Street Journal loves this kind of redemption story. I saw some thoughtful nods around the table. The narrative mattered, and I was offering a much better one than private equity fund loses 40 million in fraud. Karen Zhao looked at Richard and the other fund representatives, some kind of silent communication taking place. Daniel, I'll be frank. When we entered this meeting, half of our partnership was ready to write this off as a loss, potentially sue you and Marcus's estate to recover what we could and move on. But you presented a reasonable case. And Rebecca backing you carries weight, considering she has no dog in this fight and could easily be looking for a new job instead of defending you. She paused, studying some papers in front of her. Here's what we need to consider continuing support. 1. Marcus needs to be completely removed. All positions, board, everything. I assume that's already in motion given the circumstances. 2. You need to hire an executive coach or advisor, someone with real CEO experience to mentor you through this transition. 3. We bring in an operations consultant for 90 days to do a full assessment and recommend organizational changes. And 4. You give us full transparency, weekly updates, no surprises. Can we agree to that? These were reasonable terms, more than reasonable considering. I agree with everything, I replied without hesitation. Marcus will be formally removed from all positions today. I'm open to executive coaching. In fact, I think it would be valuable. And full transparency isn't a problem, considering that secrecy and manipulation are exactly what got us into this mess. Tom Bradford of Cascade Ventures nodded. Our fund will also support moving forward, but with similar conditions. And Daniel, a personal thing. I met Marcus socially a few times, networking dinners, events. He was charming, convincing. I never would have suspected. But looking back, I realize you were always in the shadows, never seeking the spotlight. And now I understand why. Marcus wouldn't let you. I'm sorry it had to come to this, a destroyed family and criminal charges, for the truth to come out. But for what it's worth, I think the company is in better hands now. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, going through logistics, timelines, strategic communications. When it finally ended, at 11:15 a.m. on a Monday that would change everything, I had achieved the impossible. I had turned investors who should have been blaming me into allies. I had positioned myself not as the vengeful brother who destroyed the CEO, but as the resilient founder saving the company from a fraudster. And I had, for the first time in my life, fully claimed credit and recognition for what I had built. As everyone left, Rebecca stayed behind. That was impressive, Daniel. You completely changed the narrative. They came in ready to blame you and left ready to support you. I couldn't have done it without you speaking for me, I replied honestly. You didn't have to do that, Rebecca. You could have stayed neutral, protected your own position. She shook her head. Daniel, I've been CFO long enough to recognize a fraudster when I see one, and Marcus was a good one. But I also recognize genuine integrity, and you have that. This company deserves honest leadership for a change. She hesitated, then added, one thing I didn't mention in the meeting because I didn't want to complicate matters, but you should know. Trevor, the CPO, resigned early this morning via email. He said he couldn't be associated with the controversy and is accepting a position at another company. I'd say a good release. He was always Marcus's creature anyway. Trevor's departure was truly a welcome departure. He'd never respected my technical expertise, had always treated my objections as irritating obstacles rather than legitimate concerns. I'm going to need to replace him, I said, more to myself than to Rebecca. Someone who understands product, but also respects the engineering foundation. Someone who works with me instead of against me. Rebecca smiled. Welcome to being CEO. Every problem is now your problem. She was right, and it was both scary and empowering at the same time. There was no longer Marcus to blame, to hide behind, to use as an excuse. It was just me now. Me and the company I'd built with my own 2 hands, line by line, over 15 years. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity that tested every ounce of energy I had. On Tuesday morning, 2 days after the board meeting that changed everything, I received the news I'd been waiting for, but which still left me with a strange feeling in my chest. Robert Chen called me at 7 in the morning. Daniel, I just received confirmation. Marcus has been formally indicted. 8 counts of securities fraud, 4 counts of wire fraud, 2 of conspiracy and 3 of embezzlement. If convicted on all counts, he's looking at potentially 35 years in federal prison. 35 years. My brother, the guy who taught me to ride a bike, who shared my room with me for almost 2 decades, who once defended me from bullies at school, was facing the rest of his life in prison. And Richard Sterling? I asked, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. Sterling is cooperating fully with investigators, Robert replied. He hired one of the best white-collar defense attorneys in New York and is blaming Marcus. He's saying he was manipulated, that he didn't fully understand what Marcus was proposing, that when he realized the illegal nature of the discussions, he backed out. It's bullshit, of course. The emails show he was deeply involved. But if he turns over enough evidence against Marcus, he might get immunity or a favorable plea deal. So that's how it worked at the top. Sterling, who had actively conspired with Marcus, would likely escape while my brother took the full blame. Justice is a strange thing. News of the formal charges exploded in the tech media immediately. It was no longer a regional Portland story. Now, it was everywhere. TechCrunch, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times all covered the fall of Marcus Cooper, painting him as a classic example of entrepreneurial hubris and startup fraud. And in every article, every podcast discussing the case, my name began to appear differently, no longer as the tech brother, no longer as the lead developer. Now I was Daniel Cooper, the co-founder who exposed the fraud, the true architect of Cooper Brothers technology, the victim turned whistleblower. The narrative was finally changing, after 15 years of being erased from my own company's history. But with this new visibility came scrutiny as well. I received dozens of interview requests, some from legitimate outlets, some from tech tabloids looking for juicy family drama. I declined them all, following Robert's advice not to make public statements while the criminal investigation was active. But I made one strategic exception. Portland Business Journal, the newspaper that covered our story from the beginning, requested a lengthy interview. After consulting with the crisis PR team, I agreed on one condition. It would be about the company's future, not just the past scandal. The interview was scheduled for Friday, giving me time to prepare talking points that would position the company and me in the right light. Meanwhile, I had a company to run, and that reality hit hard on Wednesday when I had my first all-hands meeting as the de facto leader of Cooper Brothers Tech. 85 employees packed our largest conference room, others joining via video call from the Seattle satellite offices Marcus had opened the year before. I saw fear on their faces, uncertainty, and in some cases anger. These were people whose 401s were invested in company equity, whose families depended on salaries here, who had believed in the vision Marcus had sold, and now that vision had been exposed as built on fraud. I was all that stood between them and potential unemployment. "Good afternoon, everyone," I began, my voice amplified by the microphone, but still sounding less confident than I'd like. I know the last 2 weeks have been terrifying and confusing. I know many of you are worried about your jobs, about the future of this company, about whether you'll be able to pay your mortgage next month. So I'm going to be completely transparent with you about where we stand. I paused, looking around the room, forcing eye contact with as many people as possible. Marcus Cooper committed serious crimes. He defrauded investors, embezzled company funds, and tried to force me out through illegal means. He's now facing federal criminal charges and will likely go to prison. This is the horrific reality we all need to accept. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the air conditioning humming. But here's the other reality, the one that's most important to each of you. This company isn't Marcus Cooper. This company has never been Marcus Cooper. This company is the software you, our incredible engineers, build and maintain every day. It's the customer service our support team provides. It's the deals our sales team closes. It's the numbers our finance team keeps accurate. Marcus was a public face, a talented salesman, but he wasn't the substance. You are the substance. And as long as you're here, doing the exceptional work you do, this company has a future. I saw some nods, some faces beginning to relax slightly. Now specifics on what's next, I continued, entering territory Rebecca and I had carefully prepared. Our cash position is strong. We have 18 months of runway at the current burn rate, longer if we need to tighten our belts. Our core investors have committed to continuing to support the company. I'm assuming the role of interim CEO, and we will hire additional operational leadership to fill gaps. There will be no layoffs. I repeat, there will be no layoffs. You will not lose your jobs because of Marcus Cooper's crimes. I saw visible relief spread throughout the room, some people literally exhaling breaths they had been holding. But I'll be honest, the next 6 months are going to be tough. We're going to face negative PR. Some clients will be nervous and will have to work extra hard to reassure them. Recruiting will be challenging until the storm passes. So I need all of you to make a conscious choice. Are you in or out? If you're in, you need to be all in, committed to proving that we're more than our fraudster former CEO. If you're out, without hard feelings, I'll provide good references and 3 months severance for anyone who wants to leave now. I waited, my heart pounding, wondering if half the room would get up and leave. No one moved. Then, surprisingly, one of the senior engineers who had been with the company since 2015, a guy named Dev Patel, raised his hand. Daniel, I worked with you for 7 years. You were always the guy who truly understood the product, who cared about doing things right instead of fast, who treated engineers like people instead of resources. Marcus was charismatic and all, but between you and me, most of the engineering team always knew you were the real deal. If you're leading, I'm in, 100%. The room erupted in spontaneous applause, and I felt emotion tighten in my throat. Others began to speak, declaring support, asking practical questions about next steps, offering ideas. After the all-hands meeting, my inbox exploded with emails from employees. Messages of support, offers to help in any way possible, even a few confessions from people saying they'd always thought Marcus was a bully or manipulative but were afraid to speak up. One message in particular hit me hard. It was from Sarah, a junior engineer who'd been hired just 6 months ago, straight out of a coding boot camp, without a formal computer science degree. Daniel, when I interviewed here, Marcus barely looked at me. I told the hiring manager I wasn't sure about hiring career changers without traditional backgrounds, but you fought for me. You said coding skills mattered more than pedigree, and you gave me a chance, so I'm going to fight for you now. This company is yours, and you deserve to run it. On Thursday, I had my first connection with an executive search headhunter about finding a COO. The firm Robert recommended was a top-tier firm, the same one that had placed executives at several tech unicorns. The recruit, a woman named Amanda Chen, with no relationship to our CFO, Rebecca Chen, got straight to the point. Daniel, I'll be frank. The scandal makes this a difficult search. Many high-caliber executives will be hesitant about joining a company in the midst of a federal investigation, no matter how clean you personally are. But the flip side is that this is exactly the kind of turnaround challenge some executives truly love. The opportunity to rebuild, to be part of a redemption story, can be very attractive to the right kind of person. We spent 2 hours discussing what I needed. Someone with experience in operations at a 50 to 100 person tech company, someone who had navigated crises before, someone who could complement my technical strengths with solid business acumen, and critically, someone with a healthy enough ego not to try to overshadow me or replicate the dynamic I had with Marcus. "You're describing a unicorn," Amanda said with a smile I could hear over the line. "But I happen to know 2 or 3 people who might be a perfect fit. One in particular, Michelle Rodriguez, just left a SaaS company in Seattle where she was VP of Operations. She's looking for a COO opportunity, has specific experience in post-crisis management, and I've heard she's intentionally looking for someone with a strong technical founder because she's tired of working with sales-type CEOs. Michelle Rodriguez sounded promising, so I scheduled a call with her for Friday afternoon, after my interview with the Portland Business Journal. Meanwhile, I had more immediate matters to deal with. Our largest client, a regional supermarket chain that represented 15% of our annual revenue, had requested an emergency meeting. Their CTO was concerned about the stability of our vendor relationship given recent events. Translation, they were considering jumping ship and didn't want to be locked into a long-term contract with an imploding company. I flew to Seattle Thursday night for an in-person meeting on Friday morning, taking Rebecca with me because numbers don't lie, and she could reassure them about our financial position. The Friday morning meeting at their Bellevue headquarters was tense. Their CTO, CFO, and general counsel were all present, a show of force that made it clear how seriously they were considering ending the relationship. "Daniel," began the CTO, a man in his 50s named James Morrison, "your software is critical to our supply chain operations. Hundreds of our stores depend on it, running 24/7. We can't have uncertainty about vendor stability. I need assurances that we won't wake up one day and find your company has gone bankrupt or that your product isn't being maintained because everyone jumped ship." It was a fair concern, so I didn't sugarcoat it. "James, I completely understand. If I were in your position, I'd be asking exactly the same questions. So here are the facts. Our cash position is solid, 18 months of minimum runway. Our investors have reaffirmed their support. Our engineering team is intact and committed, with 0 attrition since the scandal broke. And most importantly, the product you use, I built it. Every original line of code was mine. Marcus was in sales and marketing. He never touched the product. So the person who really matters for technical continuity, me, is here and will continue to be here," Rebecca added, opening her laptop and showing spreadsheets. "On the financial side, we can provide complete transparency. Here are our numbers, without Marcus's embezzlement. In fact, we are financially healthier than Marcus publicly represented because he was hiding his illegal appropriations, and we are prepared to offer favorable contract renewal terms as a gesture of good faith." Their general counsel, a woman named Patricia Lynn, intervened. "What kind of terms?" Rebecca had prepared them. "A 2-year contract extension with a price freeze, no increases. An improved service level agreement with penalties if we fail to meet uptime commitments, and the right to terminate without penalties in the first year if there is any material negative change in our ability to deliver." These were extremely generous terms, probably too generous, but we were fighting for the company's survival. James Morrison exchanged glances with his colleagues, some silent communication taking place. "Daniel, can I ask a personal question?" he finally said. Why did you let it go on for so long? Marcus erasing you, stealing credit, apparently planning to force you out? You seem like a smart guy. You must have seen some signs. It was a question I'd asked myself 1,000 times, one that still kept me awake some nights. Honestly, James, part of it was naivete. I trusted my brother completely. I couldn't conceive he would betray me so systematically. Part of it was that I genuinely didn't want the spotlight. I'm an engineer at heart. I prefer writing code to giving interviews or making sales pitches. And part, I paused, forcing brutal honesty, was cowardice. It was easier to let Marcus handle the world-facing stuff and hide in the technical work. It took me too long to realize that this wasn't a healthy division of labor. It was abuse, but I learned. Hard. Something about my honesty seemed to resonate with James. I appreciate you being straightforward with me. Look, let's maintain the relationship for now. But we're also going to start evaluating backup vendors, just in case. Nothing personal, just business prudence given the circumstances. It was the best outcome I could realistically hope for. We shook hands, signed the contract extension amendment Rebecca had prepared, and flew back to Portland. On the plane, Rebecca gave me an appraising look. You did well there. You were honest, vulnerable even, but you also projected competence. That's a fine line to walk, but you're getting better at it. I was learning that being a CEO wasn't just about having all the answers or always appearing in control. Sometimes it was about admitting failure, showing growth, being human. The interview with the Portland Business Journal that afternoon was my first time actually speaking publicly since everything blew up. The reporter, a guy named Jake Martinez, who had covered the Portland tech scene for a decade, arrived at my office at 3 p.m. with a recorder and a notepad full of questions that were likely going to be uncomfortable. "Daniel, thanks for doing this," he began, setting the recorder on the table between us. "I know you've been avoiding the media, so I appreciate the opportunity. I want to start with the obvious question. Your brother is facing potentially decades in federal prison. How do you feel about that?" Straight for the jugular. I took a deep breath, remembering PR coaching. Be honest, but not overly emotional. Focus on the truth instead of personal drama. "Jake, I'm not going to lie and say there's no emotional component. Marcus is my brother. We grew up together. I loved him. But the Marcus I thought I knew didn't exist, or at least didn't exist for a long time. The real man spent years systematically defrauding me, defrauding investors, and stealing from the company. So yes, there's a part of me that's devastated by the destruction of my family. But the bigger part is relieved. The truth is finally out and determined to ensure justice is served." Jake took notes. "Some are saying you could have handled this internally, that going federal was a nuclear option. Even your own parents are apparently upset with you. Any regrets about how you handled it?" That hurt, but I expected it. I have zero regrets about involving authorities. When you discover securities fraud, wire fraud, or federal crimes, it's not something you handle internally. It's something you report. Anything less would be complicity. As for my parents, I understand they're in pain. No parent wants to believe their child is capable of what Marcus did. I hope they eventually understand I had no choice. "Let's talk about the future," Jake continued. "You're now effectively CEO of a $200 million company, despite having no formal business management experience. Some investors have to be nervous. What do you tell them?" Here was my chance to control the narrative. I say, experience comes in many forms. Marcus had an MBA, he had charisma, he had all the traditional CEO credentials, and he used all of that to commit massive fraud. I have 15 years of experience building products that customers love, leading engineering teams, solving complex problems. Most importantly, I have integrity. I will never steal from the company. I will never lie to investors. I will never throw people under the bus to make myself look good. If investors prefer a flashy CEO who might be a fraudster versus a solid technical founder who is honest, then they're probably not the right investors for this company anyway. Jake smiled slightly. That's refreshingly blunt. You're setting a very different tone than Marcus. He was all about polish and charm. And look where that led, I said simply. The interview continued for another 40 minutes, covering plans for the company, anticipated challenges, and my vision for the product moving forward. When it ended, Jake turned off the recorder and looked at me with something that seemed genuine sympathy. Off the record, I covered Marcus for years. I always thought he was a little too good to be true, you know? The kind of guy who always had the perfect answer, never admitted uncertainty or mistake. You seem real, flawed, but real. I think this will resonate with people better than you think. I hoped he was right. The article would be published in the Monday edition, with an online version Sunday night. It would be the first major piece shaping the public narrative about me as a leader. The call with Michelle Rodriguez on Friday afternoon was a revelation. Within 5 minutes of talking, I understood why Amanda Chen, the headhunter, had said she would be a perfect fit. Michelle had a direct, no-nonsense energy that reminded me of Rebecca, but with years of operations experience that I desperately needed. Daniel, I'm going to be transparent with you from the start, she said, her voice clear through the video call. I've read everything about the situation with your brother. I've done my own due diligence, spoken to some people in your industry, and here's my read. You were royally screwed for years, finally grew a backbone and did something about it, and now you're sitting in a company that desperately needs real operational leadership. Am I right so far? I laughed for the first time in days. That's a very blunt way of putting it, but yes, essentially correct. Michelle leaned into the camera, her dark eyes intense. Good. Because I don't have time for bullshit or politics. I've had 3 jobs in my career where I had to clean up messes left by narcissistic CEOs who were great at selling visions but terrible at execution. At my last company, the CEO had spent $15 million in venture capital on fancy offices and extravagant parties, while the product was mediocre and customer churn was at 40%. It took me 2 years to turn it around, and when I was finally healthy, the board brought in a new external CEO who took all the credit. I'm tired of this. So if I'm considering Cooper Brothers Tech, I need to know, are you genuinely different? Or are you just another fragile male ego who will use me to do the hard work and then push me aside? The question was provocative, even offensive, but also completely fair, given what she'd experienced. Michelle, I can say I'm different, but probably every CEO says that. So let me give you specifics. I spent 15 years letting my brother take credit for my work because I genuinely didn't care about the spotlight. I only cared about building a good product. That was partially healthy, partially dysfunctional. Now I'm in a position where I have to be the face of the company, because there's no alternative. But I don't change who I fundamentally am. I'm an engineer first, CEO by necessity. If you come in as COO, you wouldn't be my minion executing my orders. You'd be my partner leading the entire half of the business that I have no expertise in. And when you succeed, you'll get credit. Publicly, loudly, repeatedly, because unlike Marcus, I truly understand that a company's success comes from the entire team, not from a cult of personality around the founder. Michelle studied my face through the screen for a long moment. Okay, another tough question. Your family is destroyed. Your brother is going to prison. Your parents apparently aren't speaking to you. How do you know you won't wake up in 6 months and decide it's not worth it, that you want to give up everything and disappear? How do I know I'm not joining a sinking ship where the captain is bailing? This was a question I'd asked myself on sleepless nights. In those moments when the magnitude of what I'd lost, family, my relationship with my parents, the innocence of believing in my brother, all hit me at once. Honestly, Michelle, I do know if I can guarantee I'll never have a breakdown or a moment where I want to give up. These last few months have been the hardest of my life, and I imagine it will get worse before it gets better. Fight like hell to save it. Something changed in Michelle's expression. Okay, I'm interested, but I have conditions. One, I want a significant equity stake, at least 2%, vesting over 4 years with a 1-year cliff. Two, I want competitive compensation, $280,000 base plus performance-based bonuses. Three, I want real autonomy over operations, hiring, processes, and organizational structure. You focus on product and technology. I'll focus on making the company actually work. Four, if at any point you start messing around, micromanaging, or taking credit for my work, I have the right to walk away with an accelerated vesting period. And five, I want a board seat eventually, once I've proven my worth. These were aggressive terms, but they were also exactly the kind of confidence and clarity the company needed. I'll accept anything, I replied without hesitation. When can you start? Michelle smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her serious face. I have 2 months' notice at my current job, but I can negotiate for a month if you need it urgently. Say 3 weeks starting Monday. That gives you time to do the hiring paperwork, and it gives me time to do more due diligence on your operation. 3 weeks is perfect. I'll have Rebecca, our CFO, send a formal offer letter by Monday morning. And Michelle, thank you for being willing to take a chance on a company in the middle of a shitstorm. Michelle waved her hand. Daniel, I don't do easy, I do challenging. And rescuing a good company from a fraudulent founder. That's exactly the kind of challenge that gets me up in the morning. Maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. Jake Martinez's article appeared in the Portland Business Journal on Sunday night, and the impact was immediate and massive. The headline was perfect. From shadow to spotlight, how Daniel Cooper saved his company by exposing his brother. The article was balanced but definitely sympathetic, painting Marcus as the villain and me as the reluctant hero forced into action. It included quotes from our interview, but it also appeared Jake had spoken with others, including some of our engineers, who spoke about my technical leadership, and surprisingly, Tom Bradford of Cascade Ventures, who quoted how investors were renewedly confident in the company under Daniel's solid technical leadership. By Monday morning, the article had been picked up by other outlets, shared thousands of times on LinkedIn and Twitter, and my inbox was exploding with messages. But not everything was positive. I also received my first real taste of public backlash. A popular tech blog, known for controversial takes, published an opinion piece titled, "Did Daniel Cooper Go Too Far?", arguing that I had destroyed my family out of corporate greed, that I could have resolved my differences with Marcus privately, and that turning my brother over to the FBI was family betrayal of the worst kind. The comment section was toxic, full of people who knew nothing about the situation but had strong opinions about my supposed moral failings. He sent his own brother to prison for money, one comment read. What kind of person does that? Family should come first. Reading it hurt more than I wanted to admit, even though I knew it was bullshit. Rebecca found me in the office Monday morning looking worried. Did you see the Tech Buzz piece? She asked. Unfortunately, yes, I replied, sipping my 4th coffee of the day even though it wasn't even 10 in the morning. It's bothering you more than it should. It wasn't a question. Rebecca had become surprisingly adept at reading my emotional state. Yes, I mean, intellectually I know I did the right thing. Marcus committed federal crimes. But emotionally? Part of me still wonders if there was another way, some way I could have exposed the fraud without completely destroying my family. Rebecca pulled out a chair and sat across from me, her expression firm but compassionate. He said, "Doing the right thing usually costs something, and people who haven't had to pay that cost will always judge and criticize." She was right, but it still hurt. What hurt even more was the message I received from my mother that afternoon. Not a call, just a short, cold text. "We saw the article. You seem very proud of yourself for destroying your brother. Marcus is devastated, and so are we. I don't know when or if we can forgive this. Mom." I stared at that message for a full 10 minutes, reading and rereading it, feeling my own mother's rejection like a physical pain in my chest. Part of me wanted to call, beg her to understand, explain everything again. But the stronger part, the part that had grown through this nightmare, knew it was no use. My parents had chosen to believe Marcus, had chosen to see me as the villain, and nothing I said now would change that. Maybe eventually, years in the future, when the full truth came out in court, they would understand. Or maybe not. Either way, I had to move on. Tuesday's board meeting was my first formally as CEO. Over the weekend, investors had voted unanimously to officially name me interim CEO, removing the performance-dependent interim for the next 6 months. It was the validation I needed, but also the weight of real responsibility. "First order of business," Karen Zhao from private equity began. "We need to discuss succession and contingency planning. Daniel, this is nothing against you, but if something happens to you, whether medically, personally, or you decide you can't handle it, the company needs a backup plan." It was reasonable, if not exactly confidence-inspiring. "I totally agree," I replied. "Actually, I have good news on that front. We've hired a COO, Michelle Rodriguez, starting in 3 weeks. She has 15 years of operations experience, including 2 successful turnarounds. She can serve as a succession backup if needed." Richard Sterling, who had been quiet since nearly being indicted himself, spoke for the first time. "Daniel, I have an uncomfortable issue we need to address. The company name is Cooper Brothers Tech. Obviously, this is now problematic. A brother is going to federal prison. Do we need to consider rebranding?" It was something I'd thought about but been avoiding. The idea of erasing even the company name, the last connection to the dream Marcus and I once shared, was painful. But Sterling was right. "I've thought about it," I admitted, "and I agree that we will eventually need to rebrand. But timing matters. If we do it now, it seems reactive and desperate. If we wait until we've stabilized, shown some growth, perhaps launched a new major product feature, then we can frame it as a new era of the company, rather than running away from scandal. I propose we revisit this in 6 months. Tom Bradford agreed. It makes sense, and when rebranding, I strongly suggest that the new name not have Cooper in it at all. Complete fresh start. That also hurt, the idea of erasing my own name along with Marcus's, but it was probably smart. I agree, he said simply. The rest of the meeting focused on financials, which were actually quite good now that Rebecca had cleaned up the books by removing Marcus's embezzlement and strategy going forward. I presented a product roadmap for the next 12 months, focusing on features our larger customers had requested, but that Marcus had always dismissed as not sexy enough. They weren't sexy, but they were exactly what our paying customers wanted, and at the end of the day, they were the ones who mattered. On Wednesday, I received an unexpected call from Jennifer. My ex-girlfriend, the woman Marcus had used against me, and then apparently had some kind of relationship with him, was calling out of the blue. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Daniel," her voice sounded small and nervous, "I know you probably don't want to talk to me. I know you hate me for what I did. But I need to tell you something important, something that could help the case against Marcus. My stomach tightened. What is it? Jennifer took a shaky breath. The FBI contacted me. They want me to testify about his relationship with me, about things he said, about the equity sale he made to me. Daniel, I didn't know it at the time, but he was basically using me as a way to launder some of the stolen funds and also as a spy on you. He asked me questions about you constantly when we were together those few months after you and I broke up. So you admit you had a relationship with him, I said, my voice colder than I intended. How long, Jennifer? When did it actually start? She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. It started about 3 months after we broke up. He came to me, said he was worried about you, that you were acting strange at work. He made it seem like he was being a caring brother, and I was lonely and still hurt about our breakup, and I was stupid, Daniel. I let him manipulate me. The relationship lasted about 4 months before I realized he was a sociopath, but by then he had already gotten a lot of information from me about you, about how you were feeling about the company, about your insecurities. He used all of that against you. Part of me wanted to yell at her, tell her how badly she had betrayed me, but the bigger part just felt tired. Jennifer, if the FBI wants you to testify, then cooperate fully. Tell them everything. It will be good for the case against Marcus, and honestly, it will be good for your own soul. But you and me, there's nothing more here. You made your choices, I made mine. I hope you find some peace eventually, but it can't be with me. There was a long silence. I understand, she finally said, her voice full of regret. For what it's worth, I always knew you were the good one. Marcus was charming but empty. You had real substance. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. The call ended and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction in her apology, no sadness, just numbness. Marcus had taken so much from me that even my emotional responses were frayed. On Thursday, something I hadn't expected happened. Dev Patel, the senior engineer who had spoken out on my behalf at the all-hands meeting, asked me for a private meeting. "Daniel, I have something you need to know," he began, looking uncomfortable. "It's about the code base, specifically some of the commits that were made under Marcus's account over the years." My stomach dropped. Marcus didn't know how to code. He never contributed code. Why would he have commits under his name? Dev hesitated. Exactly. So I investigated because I was curious. It turns out that about 3 years ago, Marcus started occasionally committing code. Small things, bug fixes, minor features, and he always made a big deal about it in stand-ups, how he was getting more technical, getting hands dirty with the product. Remember that? I vaguely remembered. Marcus had suddenly developed an interest in understanding code better, and had even taken some online courses. At the time, I found it touching that he was trying to understand my work better. Okay, yeah, and? Dev opened his laptop, showing Git history. Then I looked at the timestamps and IP addresses of his commits. Daniel, they were all made late at night or early in the morning from an IP address I tracked to a freelancing site. Marcus was paying freelance developers to write code and then committing under his name to make it look like he was a technical contributor. It's pathetic, honestly. He was so obsessed with taking credit for everything that he even fabricated technical contributions he didn't make. I looked at the evidence on Dev's screen and felt something between hysterical laughter and nausea. Of course Marcus had done this. It wasn't enough to steal credit for my work. He had to actively fabricate his own contributions. Dev, thanks for bringing this to me. Can you document everything and send it to Robert Chen, my attorney? It might be relevant to the case. Dev nodded. I already did. But Daniel, that got me thinking. If Marcus was willing to fabricate this, what else did he fabricate? Metrics he reported to investors, customer testimonials, awards the company supposedly won. Maybe it's worth doing a full audit of all the public claims he made about the company. It was a good, if scary, idea. I'll get Rebecca involved. Thanks, Dev. Seriously. On Friday, exactly 2 weeks after Marcus was arrested, I received the news that he had been denied bail. His attorney had argued that he wasn't a flight risk, that he had deep roots in the community, and that he deserved to be free while awaiting trial. But the prosecution had argued that he had the means and motivation to flee, that he had demonstrated a pattern of dishonesty, and that he potentially had hidden assets offshore. The judge agreed with the prosecution. Marcus would remain in a federal detention facility until his trial, which probably wouldn't happen for at least a year, a full year in prison before he was even convicted. Part of me felt sorry for him, but the larger part remembered the hundreds of emails where he plotted my destruction, the money he stole, the lives he risked with his fraud. He had made his bed. That night, for the first time in months, I left the office at a reasonable hour. I drove to my favorite spot in Portland, a small park in the West Hills overlooking the entire city. I sat on a bench as the sun was setting, turning the sky shades of orange and pink, and finally let myself feel it all. The pain of losing my brother, not to death but to something worse, to discover that the person I thought I knew never really existed. The heartbreak of my parents rejecting me, choosing the fraudulent son over the honest one. The fear of whether I could truly lead the company, whether I was up to this massive challenge. And also, underneath it all, a tiny thread of something that took me a while to recognize: relief. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't living in Marcus's shadow. He wasn't being manipulated, diminished, erased. He was scary as hell, but he was also liberating. My phone buzzed. Message from Robert Chen. Daniel, good news. Jennifer testified before the grand jury today. Her testimony was apparently devastating for Marcus. The prosecution is confident they have an ironclad case. Also, Marcus's attorney has contacted me. He wants to discuss a potential plea deal. Marcus is apparently considering pleading guilty to some charges in exchange for a lighter sentence. They want to know if you'd be willing to give a statement in favor of leniency. Thoughts? I stared at that message for a long time. Marcus was finally broken, ready to plead guilty, and was reaching out to me, the brother who destroyed him, begging for mercy. It was almost funny in its irony. Typed response: no. Marcus made his choices. He can live with the consequences. I won't help him get away with anything. Let justice take its course. Michelle Rodriguez officially started on Monday morning, exactly 3 weeks after our first conversation, and it was like a shot of pure adrenaline into the company. She arrived at 7:30, an hour before the official start time, met Rebecca and me for coffee at Stumptown near the office, and already had a list of 20 items she wanted to address in the first week. Okay, here's my initial assessment based on the documents I reviewed, Michelle began, pulling out a precisely organized notebook. You have 85 people, but only 3 layers of management, which would be impressive if it weren't actually a sign that no one really knows who reports to whom or who is responsible for what. Your hiring processes are a disaster, taking an average of 87 days to fill a position. Your customer onboarding takes 6 weeks when it should take 2, and you have no real KPIs or accountability structure. It was brutal but accurate. And how do you propose to fix this? I asked, genuinely curious and a little intimidated by her speed. Michelle smiled. In the first 30 days, I'm going to do 3 things. 1, establish a clear organizational structure with definitive reporting lines and areas of responsibility. 2, implement a framework of OKRs, objectives, and key results so everyone knows exactly what they're being measured by. 3. Audit all critical processes and identify bottlenecks. After the first 30 days, we begin the reconstruction phase. But first, I need to fully understand what's broken. Rebecca looked at me with an expression that clearly said, "She's intense, but perfect." I completely agreed. The first all-hands meeting with Michelle present was on Wednesday of that week. I introduced her to the entire company, explaining her background and making it clear that she had complete autonomy over operations. "Michelle will make changes," I warned everyone. "Some will be uncomfortable, but all will be aimed at making this company more efficient, healthier, and better able to compete. I ask that you give her the benefit of the doubt and cooperate fully." Michelle then took the mic and in 20 minutes laid out her vision with a clarity that Marcus had never achieved in years of rambling speeches. She was direct, specific, and somehow managed to be tough without being mean. By the time she finished, even the most cynical engineers were nodding in approval. But while the company was beginning to stabilize internally, the situation with Marcus was escalating in ways I hadn't expected. Later that week, I received a call from Robert Chen with disturbing news. "Daniel, we need to talk about something serious. Marcus's attorney has contacted you again, and this time it's not about a plea deal. They're threatening to sue you personally for defamation, tortious interference, and conspiracy to destroy his reputation. It's obvious legal bullshit, a desperate attempt to pressure you, but we still need to take it seriously." I felt my stomach drop. Can they really do this? He's literally under federal indictment for crimes he committed, and he wants to sue me for exposing those crimes. Robert sighed. "Anyone can sue anyone for anything. The question is whether it has merit. This one doesn't, but it will cost money to defend. It will be a distraction, and it will be ammunition for those who already think you've gone too far. My recommendation is that we immediately file a counterclaim for malicious prosecution, if they do file, and make it very clear that we will not back down." He was tired of fighting, tired of the constant battle, but he couldn't show weakness now. "Do what you need to do, Robert. I won't be intimidated by Marcus, not even from inside a fucking federal prison." Robert laughed darkly. "That's the energy I need to hear. I'm drafting the papers, and Daniel, this is his last gasp. Desperate people make desperate moves. It means we know you've lost completely." The threatened lawsuit never materialized, probably because Marcus's attorney realized it would be legal suicide, but the stress of it affected me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I started having panic attacks for the first time in my life. The first happened on a Thursday afternoon during a video call with a client. I was in the middle of explaining a technical feature when suddenly my heart started racing. I couldn't breathe properly, and I felt like the walls were closing in. I managed to turn off my camera, mumbled something about a technical problem, and locked myself in the office bathroom for 15 minutes until it passed. It was terrifying. Michelle found me later, saw something on my face. "Are you okay?" she asked directly. "You look like shit, no offense." I considered lying, but I was tired of pretending everything was fine. Panic attack, first one I've ever had. I think everything is finally catching up with me. Michelle didn't judge, didn't offer empty platitudes. "Are you seeing a therapist?" I shook my head. "You should. Probably. I don't have time." She raised an eyebrow. "Daniel, you're CEO now. Part of that responsibility is taking care of your own mental health, because if you fail, the whole company suffers. I'll have my assistant find 3 top therapists in Portland who specialize in trauma and executive stress. You'll have an appointment by the end of the week. It's not a request, it's a requirement." Normally, I would have resisted someone being so bossy, but she was right. "Okay," I agreed simply. "Thank you." The therapist Michelle found, Dr. Lisa Chen, had a quiet office in the Pearl District with plants everywhere and the kind of calming atmosphere that immediately makes you feel safe. Our first session was Friday afternoon after work. "Daniel," she began after introductory formalities, "Michelle gave me basic context about your situation. Brother who betrayed you, had to expose him to authorities, now leading a company while dealing with a fallout. That's a lot. How are you processing everything?" And there, in that safe office with someone paid to listen and not judge, I finally let my guard down completely. I spoke for 90 minutes straight, everything spilling out, how I had trusted Marcus blindly, how the betrayal wasn't just about business, but about our entire shared history, how my parents hated me now, how terrified I was of failing at the company and proving Marcus right about me not being good enough. Dr. Chen listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. When I finally stopped, exhausted by the catharsis, she spoke gently. "Daniel, you're experiencing what we call complex trauma. It wasn't a single event. It was a betrayal sustained over years, culminating in you having to make an impossible choice between family and integrity. And now you're in constant survival mode, trying to keep your company alive while your emotional system is overwhelmed. The panic attack wasn't weakness. It was your body telling you that it needs to process what happened, that it can't just push through indefinitely." She paused. "We'll work together to develop coping mechanisms, to process the trauma, and to help you find a way to lead your company without destroying yourself in the process. But I need you to know, this will take time. There's no quick fix for what you've experienced." The sessions with Dr. Chen became my anchor. Twice a week, religiously, no matter how busy I was. And slowly, very slowly, I began to feel less like I was constantly drowning. I learned breathing techniques for panic attacks. I learned to separate the Marcus I had loved as a child from the Marcus who was a criminal as an adult. I learned that I could be sad about the loss of my family and still know I had done the right thing. They were small victories, but they were victories nonetheless. Michelle noticed the difference. "You seem less like you're hanging on by a thread," she commented after a month. "Whatever that therapist is doing, it's working." Meanwhile, the company was actually beginning to thrive in surprising ways. With Marcus gone and his diversions of funds stopped, our margins improved by 12% overnight. With Michelle streamlining processes, we began closing deals faster, onboarding clients more efficiently, and shipping product features in half the time. In 2 months under my leadership, and with Michelle as COO, we acquired 15 new clients, expanded 3 existing major accounts, and launched 2 features that had been on the backlog for years. Customer feedback was better than ever because now, instead of Marcus promising things we couldn't deliver, we were under-promising and over-delivering. It was a novel concept, apparently. The turnaround story began to attract positive attention. Forbes ran a feature on companies that survived founder scandals, and Cooper Brothers Tech topped the list. TechCrunch published a follow-up piece titled "How Daniel Cooper Turned Tragedy into Triumph," which focused on our post-Marcus growth. Even the Wall Street Journal mentioned our company in a longer piece on corporate fraud. But this time the angle was redemptive. And while Marcus Cooper faces decades in federal prison, his brother Daniel is quietly building the company Marcus claimed to have created. The press was good for recruiting, good for morale, and silenced some of the critics who had said the company would die without Marcus. But the moment that really made me feel like we'd turned a corner came 3 months after it all began. Tom Bradford of Cascade Ventures asked me to lunch. "Daniel, I have an interesting proposal," he began after we'd ordered. "Our fund is raising a new vehicle focused specifically on tech companies in the Pacific Northwest, and we're looking for advisors and mentors for our portfolio companies. I'd like you to consider this role. Basically, for a few hours a month, you'll talk to other founders about product development, technical leadership, and honestly about how to handle co-founder conflicts before they explode. We'd pay a consultant fee of $10,000 per month plus potential equity in the companies you help. It was surprising validation. Tom, that's very honorable, but I have to ask, why me? I'm still figuring out how to be CEO. Tom smiled. Exactly. You're not one of those smooth operators who always has all the answers. You're genuine. You've fought through absolute hell, and you've come out the other side stronger. Young founders need to see this. They need to understand that success isn't always linear, that integrity matters more than charm, and that sometimes doing the right thing means sacrificing everything. You embody these lessons in a way that no amount of MBA teaching can replicate. I accepted the offer, and it became one of the most rewarding parts of my new life. Once a week, I met with founders who were struggling with co-founder dynamics, scaling challenges, and investor pressure. And I found that helping them process their situations was actually therapeutic for me, a way to make sense of my own trauma and transform it into something useful for others. It was during one of these mentoring sessions, about 4 months after it all began, that I received the call I had simultaneously been dreading and waiting for. Robert Chen, his voice tense. Daniel, Marcus has accepted a plea deal. He will plead guilty to 5 of the most serious charges in exchange for the prosecution dropping the rest. He is looking at a sentence of 12 to 15 years in federal prison, eligible for parole after 10. The sentencing hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. The prosecution has asked if you want to make a victim impact statement. A victim impact statement, a chance to speak directly to the judge about how Marcus's crimes had affected me, potentially influencing the sentence. Would I have to see Marcus? I asked. Would he be in the courtroom? Yes, Robert confirmed. It would be the first time you've been in the same room since that day in the office when he signed the buyout documents thinking he'd won. It's going to be intensely emotional, Daniel. You need to think carefully about whether you're ready for this. I discussed this with Dr. Chen in our next session. It's your choice, she said calmly. There's no right or wrong answer. Some victims find closure in confronting their abuser. Others find more peace in walking away and letting the justice system do its work without their added emotional involvement. What does your gut tell you? I closed my eyes, trying to connect with what I felt beneath all the noise. I think I need to do this, I finally said. Not for Marcus, for me. I need to stand in that courtroom and tell my truth, not hidden behind attorneys or documents or intermediaries. I need to look at him and tell him what he did, how he hurt me, and that I survived despite it all. The 3 weeks leading up to the sentencing hearing were agonizing. Michelle insisted I take days off beforehand, rest, and mentally prepare. Dr. Chen and I had extra sessions where we practiced the statement, where she prepared me for the emotional reality of seeing Marcus in a prison jumpsuit shackled. Rebecca offered to come with me for support, and I gratefully accepted. On the day of the hearing, I woke up at 5 a.m., unable to sleep any longer. I dressed carefully in my best suit, not because I wanted to impress, but because I wanted to feel like I was in control, like I had agency. Rebecca picked me up at 7 a.m., and we drove in silence to the federal courthouse in downtown Portland. The courtroom was packed, reporters, victims of other financial crimes of Marcus's that I didn't even know about, some investors who wanted to see justice, and surprisingly, my parents. They were sitting on Marcus's side of the room, not looking at me when I entered. The sight of them, so clearly having chosen the criminal son over the honest son, cut deep, but I had prepared myself for it. And then they brought Marcus in. He was unrecognizable. The man who had always been impeccably dressed, always charming and confident, was in an orange jumpsuit with handcuffs, having lost at least 20 pounds, with eyes that were dull and defeated. For a moment, just a moment, I felt pity. Then I remembered what he had done, and the pity evaporated. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Williams with a reputation for fairness but toughness, presided. She listened as the prosecution laid out the crimes in devastating detail. She listened as Marcus's attorney tried to humanize him, talking about his good works, his contributions to the community, and how he was a first-time offender. And then it was time for victim impact statements. I was the last to speak after 3 other investors whom Marcus had defrauded. When my name was called, I stood on legs that felt like water, walked to the podium, and finally looked directly at my brother. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Your Honor," I began, my voice shakier than I would have liked, but gaining strength as I continued. "My name is Daniel Cooper, and Marcus Cooper is my brother. Or at least he was. Today, I don't know what we are to each other except perpetrator and victim. I want to tell a story about 2 boys who grew up sharing a room, sharing dreams, promising each other they would always be partners. When we started Cooper Brothers Tech 15 years ago in a tiny apartment, I genuinely believed we were a team, that we would build something incredible together. And we did build something incredible, but it turns out I built it. Marcus just assembled it and stole it." I paused, forcing myself to keep looking in Marcus's direction, even though he wasn't looking back. For 15 years, Marcus systematically erased my contributions, stole my credit, and built a personal empire on the back of my work. He manipulated investors with false metrics. He diverted hundreds of thousands of dollars in company funds to luxury lifestyles. He used my girlfriend against me, turning my own relationships into surveillance tools. And when I finally found out, he tried to force me out of my own company for a fraction of what my shares were worth, using threats and legal manipulation. But what hurts more than any financial crime, more than any fraud, is the personal betrayal. Marcus didn't just steal from me, he destroyed my ability to trust. He damaged my relationship with our parents, who to this day see me as a villain for exposing his crimes. He took 15 years of my life and made them a lie. I took a deep breath, feeling tears threaten, but refusing to let them fall. Not here, not in front of Marcus. But here's what Marcus couldn't destroy: my ability to create, my integrity, my determination. Today, the company he tried to steal is stronger than ever. The 85 employees who depend on it still have their jobs. The customers who trust our product are still served. And I, the younger brother he always underestimated, am leading it all. Marcus wanted to destroy me, but in truth, he only revealed who he truly was. And in the process, he forced me to discover who I truly am. Someone stronger than I ever knew. I paused, finally feeling Marcus look up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. I saw something there, regret maybe, or maybe just self-pity. It didn't matter anymore. Your Honor, I'm not here asking for the maximum sentence for revenge. I've already had my revenge, if you can call it that. I have my company back, my life back, my identity back, but I'm asking for real accountability. Marcus Cooper needs to understand that actions have consequences, that charm and manipulation can't forever shield you from justice, that family is no shield against the crimes you commit. He needs enough time in federal prison to genuinely reflect on what he did, on the lives he damaged, on the brother he betrayed. And honest, the business community needs to see that this kind of fraud, this kind of betrayal is not tolerated. So I ask that you impose a sentence that reflects the gravity and duration of his crimes. Thank you. I returned to my seat with trembling legs, Rebecca squeezing my hand in silent support. Judge Williams listened to a few more statements, and then it was time for sentencing. She looked at Marcus, her expression unreadable. Mr. Cooper, you had extraordinary advantages in life: education, a supportive family, natural charisma. You could have built legitimate success. Instead, you chose the path of fraud, manipulation, and betrayal. What makes your crimes particularly egregious is that your primary victim was your own brother, someone who trusted you completely. You exploited that trust for years for your own gain. This demonstrates a level of calculated cruelty that goes beyond typical white-collar crime. She paused, looking at the papers in front of her. I took into consideration your guilty plea, your lack of prior criminal history, and the letters of support from some people who believe in your capacity for rehabilitation. But I also weighed the magnitude of your crimes, the number of victims, and the duration of your scheme. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay restitution totaling $2.3 million to the various victims of your crimes. This case is a reminder that no matter how successful you appear to be, no matter how well connected, justice will eventually prevail. The gavel echoed through the courtroom. 12 years old, Marcus would be almost 54 when he was released, assuming good behavior and parole. More than half of his adult life would be spent behind bars. I looked at him as marshals led him away. He looked back one last time, not at me, but at our parents. Our mother was crying, our father had his arm around her, and in that moment I felt the last thread of connection with Marcus finally snap. He was no longer my brother. He was just a criminal I had once known. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. I delivered the brief statement Robert had helped me prepare. Justice was served today. Marcus Cooper will face consequences for his crimes. As for Cooper Brothers Tech, we are moving forward, stronger and more principled than ever. This is the last time I will speak publicly about Marcus. Our focus now is entirely on the future of the company and serving our customers. I didn't ask any questions. I simply walked to Rebecca's car and we left reporters behind. How are you feeling? She asked gently as we drove. Honest, empty, neither happy nor sad, just empty. Like when you finish a really long, intense book and don't quite know what to do with yourself now that it's over. Rebecca nodded understandingly. That's normal. You've spent months building up to this moment. Now that it's here, it will take time to process. The following days were strange. The sentencing had been massively covered by the media, and suddenly the entire Seattle and San Francisco tech scene was talking about the case. I received hundreds of messages, some supportive, some curious, some from other founders sharing their own stories of co-founder betrayals. One message in particular touched me. It was from a founder in Austin who had gone through something similar 5 years ago. Daniel, I know exactly what you're feeling right now. The emptiness, the confusion about how to feel. It took me 2 full years to truly process and heal. But here's what I learned. You didn't just survive, you thrived. And this company you built, it will be your greatest legacy, not the drama with your brother. Give yourself time and be proud of what you've achieved. I read that message 3 times, letting the words sink in. 2 months after the sentencing, we made the decision to officially rebrand the company. Michelle had led a comprehensive process, including employee surveys, customer feedback, and consultant expertise. The new name we chose was Axiom Systems, representing foundational principles and a solid foundation. No Cooper, no brothers, no baggage from the past. A complete fresh start. The rebrand launch was during our first company offsite, a 2-day event at a resort in the Columbia River Gorge. All 85 employees were there, plus Michelle and Rebecca, and for the first time, I felt like we were truly a unified team instead of a group of people working for the Cooper brothers. During dinner on the first night, I made a toast to the last 15 years of building something incredible, even when we didn't know it was being built on a broken foundation, and to the next 15 years of Axiom Systems, where we will build on integrity, transparency, and genuine partnership. Thank you all for staying, for fighting, and for believing we were worth saving. The cheer that echoed through that dining room was one of the most rewarding sounds I've ever heard. Then Dev Patel came up to me with a beer in hand. "Daniel, I have to say, when all this started, I had my doubts about whether you could really lead. You've always been the quiet guy, but man, you stepped up in a way I didn't think possible. And this new version of the company, Axiom Systems, it has soul in a way that Cooper Brothers Tech never had under Marcus. Because now it's real, not performance. Those words meant more than any positive article or investor approval, because they came from someone who had seen the entire journey, who knew both versions of me, before and after. 6 months after sentencing, something unexpected happened. My father called me. For the first time since the Portland Business Journal article almost a year ago, my father initiated contact. "Daniel," his voice sounded older, weary. "Your mother and I went to visit Marcus in prison last week. It was difficult. He's different. Broken, really. But one thing he said stayed with me. He said, 'Daniel was right about everything. I did everything he said I did. And if the tables were turned, I would never have had the courage he had to expose me. He's a better man than I ever was.' Daniel, I don't think we understood. We didn't want to understand. It was easier to blame you than to accept that we raised a son capable of such cruelty." My father was crying now. I could hear it in his voice. "I'm sorry, son. I'm sorry for not believing you, for choosing Marcus's side, for making you feel like a villain when in reality you were just honest. You lost not only your brother, but also your parents for a whole year because we were too cowardly to face the truth. I don't expect you to forgive us immediately, but I wanted you to know that we finally understand. And we are so proud of what you did with the company, how you rebuilt yourself, how you remained steadfast through all of this. You are the son we should have always celebrated." Tears were streaming down my face now, a year of pain and rejection finally finding recognition. "Dad," I managed to say, my voice choked, "I still want to have a relationship with you. You are my parents, but it will take time to rebuild trust. Can you understand that?" "Completely," my father replied. "We'll go at your pace, son. We're here when you're ready." The call ended, and I sat in my office for a long time, letting myself finally grieve and also begin to heal. It wouldn't be quick. The relationship with my parents had been fundamentally altered, but at least there was a path now, a possibility for eventual reconciliation. It was more than I'd had in a whole year. Dr. Chen, in our session that week, smiled when I told him about the call. "This is a major breakthrough, Daniel. Your family is starting to process the truth. It took time, but they got there. How are you feeling about this?" I thought carefully. Relieved, sad for the lost time, but also hopeful. For the first time in a long time, hopeful about something other than work. The company, now Axiom Systems, continued to thrive. By the end of the first full year under my leadership as CEO, we had grown revenues by 34%, expanded into 3 new states, hired 25 additional employees, and maintained a 94% customer satisfaction rating. Forbes named us one of the most promising private technology companies in the Pacific Northwest. Michelle had transformed operations so completely that we were now a model of efficiency. And me, I had finally grown into the CEO role, not just accepting, but embracing it. I was still an engineer at heart, still spending a few hours every week coding to keep me grounded, but I had also learned the art of leadership, of inspiring a team, of making tough decisions. One Friday afternoon, almost 18 months after it all began, Rebecca walked into my office with an expression I couldn't read. "Daniel, you'll want to see this." She placed her laptop on my desk, showing an email from a Tier 1 investment bank. They were discussing a potential acquisition, A Fortune 500 enterprise software company was interested in acquiring Axiom Systems for $380 million, all cash. It was a surreal, life-changing number. With my current ownership stake of 37%, after all dilution and equity grants to Michelle and key team members, I was looking at a personal payout of $140 million. Michelle, Rebecca and I spent the entire weekend reviewing the proposal, talking through the implications. "It's your decision ultimately," Michelle said Sunday night as we were finalizing our analysis. "But my opinion, they're a good company. They'll treat our employees well. They'll invest in continued product development. And honestly, Daniel, you've earned this. You built something incredible, survived absolute hell, and now you have the chance to cash out and have complete financial freedom to do literally anything you want with the rest of your life." I thought about it the following week. $140 million. I'd never have to work again. I could travel the world, start a new venture, do philanthropy, anything. But it also meant letting go of Axiom, the company that had been my identity for so long, the one I'd fought so hard to save. It was a difficult decision. I consulted with Dr. Chen, who, as always, helped me process complex feelings. "Daniel, both holding on and letting go can be the right answer. The question is, what will bring more meaning and fulfillment to your life? You defined so much of yourself for this company, but you also spent so much time traumatized by everything that happened there. Sometimes a complete fresh start is healing." She was right. How much of my attachment to Axiom was genuine love for the work, and how much was an inability to let go because I felt I had to prove something? After 3 weeks of consideration, I made my decision. I would accept the acquisition, but with conditions. 1. Every Axiom employee would have their jobs guaranteed for a minimum of 2 years, with their equity vesting accelerated so that everyone who had stayed through the turmoil would have a significant payout. 2. Michelle and Rebecca would receive massive retention bonuses to stay and help with the transition. 3. I would stay as an advisor for a year to ensure smooth integration, but after that, I would be free to pursue other interests. And 4. Part of the purchase price would be donated to a fund I would establish focused on helping startups develop healthy co-founder agreements and avoid the kind of nightmare I had experienced. The acquiring company agreed to all the terms. The acquisition was announced in late summer, almost exactly 2 years after that fateful day when Marcus was arrested. Employee reaction was initially mixed, with some worried about a large company acquisition killing culture. But when they saw the terms I had negotiated, especially the equity acceleration, which meant even junior employees were receiving 6-figure payouts, the attitude shifted to celebration. At the final all-hands meeting as an independent company, I delivered the speech I had been working on for weeks. When I started this journey 2 years ago, I was broken. I had discovered that the person I trusted most in the world had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I was terrified of trying to lead the company, convinced I would fail, that Marcus had been right, that I didn't have what it takes. But you, all of you in this room, proved me wrong. You believed in me when I barely believed in myself. You worked harder than any CEO could ask during absolute chaos and uncertainty. You turned what could have been a disaster into a success story. And now, because of all of you, we are being acquired for $380 million, 10 times our annual revenue. This is not my achievement, it is our achievement, and I want you all to know that part of the reason I negotiated the terms I did was because you deserve a share in this success. You stayed when you could have bailed. You fought when it was easier to quit. And now you are being rewarded for that loyalty. Some of you will stay with the acquiring company. Some will use this payout to start your own ventures. Some will take time off. Whatever you choose, know that it has been the honor of my life to work with you and lead you through the most difficult storm any of us have ever faced. When the cheers and applause finally died down, Dev Patel raised his hand. Daniel, one question. What are you going to do now? You're still, what? In your 30s? Your whole life ahead of you and now crazy wealthy. What's the next chapter? It was a question he'd thought about a lot. Honest? I don't know completely yet, but I do know a few things. I'm going to take some time off, real time, for the first time in 15 years. I'm going to travel, maybe finally learn to play the piano like I always wanted. I'm going to invest in my mental health, continue therapy, maybe do some serious trauma processing, and eventually, when I'm ready, I'll start something new. Maybe another tech company, maybe something completely different. But whatever it is, it will be built on a foundation of honesty and integrity from the beginning, because I've learned the hard way that success built on lies and manipulation isn't real success. It's just a house of cards waiting to collapse. The acquisition closing took place on a crisp October afternoon. I signed the final papers, transferred ownership, and was officially no longer CEO of Axiom Systems. That night, alone in my West Hills apartment, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I opened a bottle of really good whiskey I'd been saving, poured a generous glass, and toasted myself in the mirror. You survived, Daniel Cooper. You've been to hell and back. You lost your brother, almost lost your parents, had to become someone you never thought you could be. But you did it, and you didn't just survive, you thrived, you won. I drank the whiskey slowly, letting warmth spread through my chest, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt something resembling genuine peace. A few months later, on a cold December morning, I did something I'd promised myself I'd do eventually. I drove to the federal prison where Marcus was serving his sentence. I hadn't visited before, hadn't even communicated with him since courtroom. But I needed something, some kind of closure I hadn't gotten yet. The visiting room was depressing, as I'd expected. Uncomfortable chairs and humming vending machines, the smell of disinfectant and despair. And then they brought Marcus in. He was older, much older than 2 years, should make someone look. His hair was grey now, his posture was slumped, and his once charming and confident eyes were dull. He sat across the table from me and didn't speak immediately. Neither of us spoke for a long time. "Why did you come?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse with disuse. "I don't know exactly," I answered honestly. "I guess I needed to see you as a real person, not some monster in my head. I needed to see that you're actually facing consequences, and maybe, on some fucked-up level, I needed to say thank you." Marcus looked up sharply, confused. "Thank you?" "Yes. Because by destroying me, you forced me to rebuild myself. You destroyed the person I was, weak and passive and too trusting, and from that destruction, I had to create someone new, someone stronger, braver, more capable. You gave me the greatest gift without intending to, Marcus. You taught me exactly what kind of man I didn't want to be. And in the process, I discovered what kind of man I could be." Marcus looked at me as if seeing it for the first time. "Company was sold, I heard," he said quietly. 380 million. You did it. You really did. We did. Every world you tried to control, every person you underestimated. They built this, I just guided." I paused. "Marcus, I have to ask, why? Why did you do all that? You could have been a genuine partner. We could have built this together for real. Why did you need to be the only star? Why did you need to destroy me?" Marcus looked down at his hands, cuffed in front of him. "Honest, because I always feared you were better than me. You had real talent, real skill. I only had charm and bullshit. And deep down, I always knew that if people saw the truth, if they saw that you were real brains and I was just face, I would be irrelevant. So I spent years trying to make you irrelevant first. And in the end, I just proved you were the strong one all along." It was the most honest admission I had ever heard from Marcus. I'm leaving now, I said, standing. I don't know if I'll visit again, but I want you to know I don't hate you, Marcus. I can't afford the emotional energy of hate. I'm just sad for the person you could have been and chose not to be. I hope you use these years here to genuinely reflect and maybe become better when you leave. But this is your journey now, not mine. Marcus nodded, silent tears rolling down his face. Daniel, I'm sorry. I know it means nothing now. I know it's too little and too late. But I'm genuinely deeply sorry for everything I did to you. I looked at my brother, this stranger I'd known my entire life, and felt the last bit of anger leave my body. I know you are, I said simply. And then I walked away, leaving Marcus and all the baggage of the past behind. Today, sitting in my new apartment in San Francisco, where I moved to for a fresh start after everything settled, I look at my life with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. I have a net worth I never imagined possible. I have a rebuilt relationship with my parents, not perfect, but gradually healing. I have an amazing therapist I continue to see because I now understand that mental health is a lifetime journey, not a destination. I started angel investing in early-stage startups, specifically looking for technical founders who are being overshadowed by more charming co-founders. And I'm slowly, carefully starting to date again, having learned hard lessons about recognizing red flags of manipulation. It's not a perfect life. I still have bad days where the pain of betrayal hits fresh. I still have moments of missing the person I thought Marcus was, but I also have good days, more and more of them, where I wake up and feel genuinely happy to be alive. And lately, sometimes, when I'm coding on a side project, just for the love of it, not for profit or company building, but just for the pure joy of creating something, I think about everything I've been through. The betrayal, litigation, estrangement, the terror of almost losing everything. And I realize that in a weird way, Marcus did me a favor. He forced me to grow in ways I never would have if I'd remained comfortable. He taught me about resilience, about standing up for myself, about the difference between blind trust and true discernment. I wouldn't choose to go through that again. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But given what I went through, given that I survived, I can look back now and see not only destruction, but also growth. Not just loss, but also gain. Not just the end of an old life, but a new beginning. And that old company, Cooper Brothers Tech, which became Axiom Systems, now part of a larger corporation, it still holds a piece of my heart. But it no longer defines me. I am more than the product I built, more than the drama I survived, more than the fortune I made. I'm Daniel Cooper, survivor and thriver, a betrayed brother who became a strong leader, a quiet guy who learned to roar when necessary. And if there's one thing I've learned from these years of hell, it's that revenge isn't about destroying the person who wronged you. True revenge is surviving, rebuilding, and thriving so completely that they become just a footnote in your success story. Marcus will spend a decade or more in prison, the remainder of his life forever marked for the crimes he committed. That is his consequence, his justice. But my revenge, this was my revenge. It was winning not by destroying him, but by refusing to be destroyed. It was standing in court and telling my truth. It was leading a company through a crisis when everyone said it would fail. It was selling for hundreds of millions, proving I built something genuinely valuable. It was living well, living honestly, live free. And you know what? This is better revenge than anything I could have planned, because in the end, Marcus is trapped in more ways than just physical. He's trapped by his choices, by his destroyed reputation, by the knowledge of what he lost and can never get back. But me, I'm finally, genuinely free. Free from his shadow, from the lies, from the manipulation. Free to build any life I want now. And this freedom, this liberation is the ultimate and best revenge of all. Not because I'm cruel or vindictive, but because the best way to defeat someone who tried to destroy you isn't by destroying them back. It's by rising so high that they can no longer touch you. It's by healing so completely that they can no longer hurt you. It's by succeeding so absolutely that they become irrelevant to your story. And that, finally, is exactly where I am. Marcus tried to be my worst enemy, but in the end, by forcing me to fight, he unintentionally made me my own best ally. And for that, even with all the pain he caused, I have grudging gratitude, because the person I am today, strong and capable and unafraid, would never have existed without the battle he forced upon me. He meant to destroy me. Instead, he forged me into steel, and that is the greatest irony of all.